Hello there, little masters, and welcome once again to the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight the good stuff finally comes in halfling-sized portions.
West Stew Hall, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the Aragorn to my Éomer, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Sean. Well, tonight, folks, we finally come to the true end of the Silmarillion with the second half of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, or as we call it, Otropata.
Yay. And forgive us, folks, if the story tonight seems a little familiar. We're getting another case of classic Silmarillion summarizing tonight, because we've got the entire plot of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings reduced to 2 pages.
Man, that's something. That's kind of the reverse of what we've been doing, really.
Yeah, no kidding.
But don't worry. Folks, you're going to get a lot of the events of the Third Age that lead up to the moment when Gandalf first knocked on Bilbo's door. And as usual, we'll do plenty of delving into other works to shed additional light on some events and some characters you might think you already know.
One might even say we're going to do Mickle delving tonight. You know, because Mickle means a lot.
You might say that, Sean.
And I did.
Now we can't take it back. But let's leave that awful pun behind us and see if old Barliman has anything for us, shall we?
Fair enough. Well, he has managed to put together a few short questions about some of the races in Middle-earth that we don't talk about as much. The first one tonight comes to us from Donna in Indiana. Donna wrote in saying, "Can Maiar be killed?" Alan, what do you think?
Well, there's a short question. Usually questions are filled with, 5 minutes of background.
Yeah. Let's see if we can give her a short answer.
Yeah, the producer told her to get to the point, and she did. I don't think our answer will be just as short. I fear that that's the case. The short answer is yes, but with an asterisk, a pretty big asterisk at that. I think everyone listening to this now knows that Gandalf was a Maia called Olorin, and we know that he died fighting the Balrog in Moria. Now, I'll admit some people, at least on Facebook, have tried to argue that he didn't really die, that he couldn't possibly have died. He was a Maia.
Yeah, I've seen some of that. Yeah.
But really, it's pretty clear that he died, even in the text. And if you ignore that, well, let's take a look at letter 156. And Tolkien writes, Gandalf really died and was changed. But
there you go.
So there's the answer. Donna, we're done. Thank you. No. The question she's really asking is what happens to Maiar after their bodies die? Bodies or raiment, and that's really 2 different questions, isn't it? Because in this case, Gandalf is incarnate, and we're going to get to more on that. But let's just look first at what happens to him after death. Again, not a representative example, but it's interesting. We know from his own words that he passed out of thought and time, which is an indication to me that he went beyond the circles of the world. That is to say, out of time. Time exists within the circles of the world, within creation, within Ea. He passed outside of that. This is made even clearer in that same letter, 156, by Tolkien, who makes it clear that even though it was the Valar who sent him, along with the rest of the Istari, and we're going to get to that later, after he died, it wasn't them who sent him back.
Right.
And here's the quote that I think really tells us a lot. Tolkien says, "He was sent by a mere prudent plan of the angelic Valar, or governors, but authority had taken up this plan and enlarged it at the moment of its failure. Naked I was sent back for a brief time until my task is done. Sent back by whom and whence? Not by the gods, whose business is only with this embodied world and its time, for he passed out of thought and time." So, to me, it's clear that it was Iluvatar. That's the authority above the Valar.
Oh,
he even capitalizes authority, so it seems that we're talking about God, or Eru.
Yeah,
and the only entity that exists outside of thought and time. So Iluvatar sends him back stronger so he could complete his task. But that was kind of the exception that proves the rule. Sean, you've got some other examples for us?
I do, yeah. I mean, there's certainly nothing that specifies a rule for what would happen to most Maiar. I kind of go back to Ainulindale, which tells us that the Valar and the Maiar are contained and bounded in the world. To my mind, under natural circumstances, they would not leave it. I think for most Maiar, physical death, if it could even be achieved, would basically just be a loss of raiment. Their spirit would just, that maybe the body would be destroyed, and we do see this happen. The body would be destroyed, and then the spirit would just, go off and
find a new body.
Find a new body once it has or make a new body once it has the power to do so.
There's a 2-for-1 sale down at Target, so
there's a raiment sale at Target.
There's a raiment sale.
Got my Maya membership card. Um, but in that in that letter you quoted, Alan, I know Tolkien says that all the Istari can be killed because they are incarnate, and you kind of alluded to that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a good non-Istari example, and I think the best one that I can think of is maybe Sauron,
Yeah.
who like Morgoth spent his power until he actually lost the ability to change his raiment. When he went down into the abyss in the downfall of Numenor, his body was destroyed. His spirit was bound to the ring, so he was able to easily return to Barad-dûr, and he did make a new body, which he was in when he fought in at the Last Alliance.
Right.
But it just wasn't an attractive body anymore. He had lost the power to make a form that was pleasing to people, and so he just made this hideous, terrifying tyrant body.
It's useful. I mean, if you're going to lord it over the orcs and go fight battles,
if you're going to swing your mace and try and kill Dunedain and Gil-galad, and
it's good to be 10 foot tall and really ugly.
Right, exactly. And so he, I guess there's the ring involved there. But after the ring was destroyed, then the chapter we're reading tonight actually tells us that he passed. Yeah, he says he passed away like a shadow of malice. Now, I suppose you could take passed away literally, as in his spirit just passed off somewhere into the distance, or figuratively, he actually died. The sense of passed away meaning death. But regardless of how you take that, I think he is, for all intents and purposes, dead. I mean, his spirit is
certainly the equivalent of death.
Yeah, right, exactly. His spirit is scattered across Arda. He can't come back in a form that has a distinct identity anymore.
True.
Going back to another Istari example, let's look at Saruman. So when he dies in the Scouring of the Shire at the end of Return of the King,
we'll get to this in about 4 years.
I know. Yeah, no kidding. He is not shot by Legolas atop Isengard, and he does not plummet to his doom. No, when he dies late in Return of the King, it says, "About the body of Saruman a gray mist gathered, and rising slowly to a great height like smoke from a fire, as a pale shrouded figure it loomed over the hill. For a moment it wavered, looking to the west, but out of the west came a cold wind, and it bent away, and with a sigh dissolved into nothing."
Ooh. Can't wait to get to that moment.
Oh, I know. Now, how I read that is Saruman's body is destroyed. His spirit leaves it, looks to the west, looks to Valinor, and says, "Can I come home now, sir?" And the Valar say no.
No.
He gets scattered to the wind.
Sorry,
much like Sauron.
We turned your room into a craft room.
Yeah. We've rented that out. So
it's an Airbnb.
The Vanyar are just reproducing like rabbits over here. They've all got kids that need houses. So
there you go. I thought maybe it would be a nice little Airbnb rental for.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, but who would visit there, Alan? Who could get there? But no, so I think Saruman is a little different because he is incarnate, but I think the same thing ultimately happens to him. His spirit remains in Arda, but just sort of scattered, and he can't take a physical form again.
Dissipated and unable to do or accomplish anything physical, on the actual physical plane.
Yeah.
But, the thing to keep in mind about both Gandalf and Saruman, as we talked about before, they're not Maiar clad in raiment. They're incarnate Maiar. They're clad in bodies of men, able to be slain.
See tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. And I can't wait to get to that. But now the implication of that statement, the fact that they are able to be slain, when they talk about that in Unfinished Tales, and we'll get to that text, is that ordinarily a Maiar couldn't be slain. Not physically, and that's likely true if it's a big if they're in their raiment and not in a truly incarnate form. The problem that we have is the evidence we have is all about Maiar who are in some sort of incarnate form, with the exception of Sauron, the Istari first off, but also the Balrogs. I think. I mean, Gandalf killed one, as did Icthelion and Glorfindel, so I think they must have been incarnate. So those are examples of more Maiar that are killed. We just don't know what happens to their spirits.
And we don't know, and I guess we don't know how they got incarnated, if they were.
Right. I mean,
it's an interesting thought.
I think
never really.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I never really thought of them being incarnate because they weren't. Yeah. They weren't incarnated the way the Istari were. But
you wonder,
it's an interesting thought.
The thing that might be an interesting parallel is Melian. Now, thankfully, she was never slain, so we don't know what would have happened to her. But she could have been, because she had become bound by the chain and trammels of the flesh of Arda when she married Elwë Singolo, or Thingol,
right?
Also known as stabbed several times below the knees.
Oh, very well done. Very well done. Because dwarves.
Because dwarves, exactly. So, my theory is that maybe the Balrogs, like Melian in some way, became bound by the chain and trammels of the flesh of Arda and were thus able to be killed. I don't know. That's truly speculation. But
that's an interesting thought. I know that there is some stuff is it in Morgoth's Ring, or is it it's in one of the later History of Middle-earth volumes that talks about the different things that the Ainur can do that binds them to the flesh of Arda. And
okay.
It's
I'll have
things
to look
like
that up.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but it's things like eating and drinking and bearing children, which
well, thankfully the Balrogs didn't do that. Congratulations, Mrs. Balrog.
It's a shadow. It's a shadowy flame.
Oh,
look, it's got your lack of wings.
It's got your it's got your whip.
So I don't know. That's an interesting thought. I'd like to go back and look at that passage again and see some of the different things that could bind the spirit. But certainly we talk about things like the corrupting influence of Melkor.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's maybe it's interesting.
That's the thing I can think of. Let's think of a Maiar who's never incarnate. Could Eonwe have been truly killed? I really doubt it. I can't imagine that being a possible thing. But for the ones that can die, right? Yeah. For Gandalf and Saruman, and for the Balrogs and for Sauron, it takes a lot to kill a Maia, but they can be killed in the right circumstances. Mm-hmm. But since they're bound to Arda, they stay in Arda, so they're not going to go like men to some place where the elves know not.
So I think we're landing kind of in the same place, that they can be killed in the right circumstances.
Yeah.
It would take a lot because they're very powerful.
Because they are incarnate. Yeah, they're Ainur for sure, so that's hard to... But I imagine they can be killed if they're incarnate. The question is whether or not they're incarnate.
Right. Interesting thought. Yeah. And unfortunately, I think we've probably exhausted all the examples we have to go on.
I think we have. Probably far more than was ever intended.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Well, good. Well, with that, I think I'll move on to another question about the Maiar from a listener named Maya in Michigan.
Well, that's ironic.
I know. And Maya wrote in asking, how much greater in power were the Valar as compared to the Maiar? Additionally, how powerful were the Maiar in comparison to elves, humans, Ents, and so forth?
I don't know that there is a single answer to that question. I mean, it really would depend on which one you're comparing, and really in what sense or what context.
I agree.
They're both of the race of the Ainur, so they're both the same race, if you will. The Valar are lords, so they have power in that sense, but I don't think that they're biological. I mean, I don't even want to use that word because they don't have biology per se. They don't have their physical presence is just raiment. But I don't think their physical capabilities would be significantly different.
Ultimately, they're both the same race, and that's what we should keep in mind. The Valar are more powerful in a lordship sense. Yeah,
in an authoritative sense.
That's good.
And even in a responsibility sense. I mean, they're all associated with particular domains, right?
Right.
Whereas where a Vala like Ulmo is associated with all the waters of the world,
right?
The Maya, the Maiar that serve under him, let's say Ose, is concerned only with the shallows and the waves,
right?
Right. So I think that's kind of what you're looking at there. So really,
it's a question of authority and sort of scope, like you said, scope of responsibility, as opposed to the power of maybe the way that humans are more powerful than ants, which I know is an extreme example.
Right, that is an extreme example, but there's not a single, even the weakest human is stronger than a strong ant.
Right.
Not in terms of, per ounce of body weight. We know that the ants are stronger in that regard, but show me an ant and I can crush it. I mean,
just showing just how awful that analogy was.
That is a terrible analogy. That's okay. Yeah. It really depends on whether they're in their domain too. I mean, Eonwe's the mightiest in arms, so he could beat Lorien in a sword fight. He could probably even beat Tulkas in a sword fight, but in a wrestling match, I'm taking Tulkas. In the world of dreams, I'm going to take Lorien.
Yeah.
And within each group, some are going to have more power than others. Melkor was once the most powerful of the Valar, but then he spent all his power until he couldn't even heal his own limp. Yeah,
no, that's a really good point. Well, I think that's actually a really nice segue to this question of how do they compare to elves and men and the other races. I mean, after he spent all his power, Morgoth was
almost beaten by an elf, Fingolfin. I mean, that was a very close fight.
Yeah, he would, if without without Gron tearing holes in the ground.
Yeah. What was once the mightiest of the Valar, the mightiest of the Ainur, was almost beaten by an elf. Sauron spent all his power down and got his finger cut off by Isildur, a man.
A man, you're right.
Gandalf and the Balrog, both Maiar, I guess, they seem pretty evenly matched in Fellowship, but then, Gandalf dies, as we were just talking about. He comes back more powerful, and then, he's about to face off against the Witch King, Minas Tirith, and he's not overconfident about that.
You're
fight.
right. Yeah, he's not like, well, no big deal. I can take this guy.
Right, exactly. So even a man, a former man, an undead man, however you want to say that, was a serious contender for him.
At least, close to a match for a powerful Maya.
Yeah, right.
A Maya
exactly.
who had been, amped.
Right. Right, exactly. He got the Aerie juice.
Red Bull gives him wings.
Yeah. I'm kidding. So I think it really varies on the circumstances and the individuals involved. And I guess the other thing I would say is, we always need to keep in mind as we always do when we have a question like this. I love questions like this. It's always fun to talk about these kinds of things, but we just need to remember that, quantifying the world in this way wasn't really something that Tolkien was very interested in.
Yeah,
and because of that, he didn't really give us anything to go on.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's just not how he put his world together.
Right.
And the Lord of the Rings teaches us, by the way, that even a man can be a terrible dark lord if given the wrong kind of power. So
that's true.
Power. I don't know that it's necessarily locked to tiers of Ainur or elves or men, but
right.
I understand we have one more question hanging around in the bag.
We do. Yeah, this is actually one more from Maya that came in with the one we just talked about. So I thought it was a good place to talk about it.
Okay.
Tolkien stated the orcs were originally elves. As orcs, did they retain the non-aging lifespan of the elves, or were they subject to death and disease as were mortal men?
Oh, I was hoping we wouldn't get this question. I wanted to dodge this one.
It's a contentious one.
It is.
It's really not. It really is not that simple.
No.
I think we can give a quick answer.
I think we can. I mean, we know that the short answer is that Tolkien didn't want them to be immortal.
Right.
So, as he continued to develop his mythology in later years, he started to kind of question whether or not they were ever originally elves, which is what the Silmarillion says is their origin.
Right.
In Myths Transformed, which is in Morgoth's Ring, there are some pages dedicated to the origin of orcs. And Christopher Tolkien presents a variety of different ideas on it. You've got some, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, really, they're truly just all kinds of different possibilities.
Yeah.
Maybe they were bred from men, not elves. Maybe they're not really bred from men or elves. Maybe they're not even really sentient. Maybe they're just animals bred to seem sentient.
Okay.
Maybe they're animals that have been endowed with a little bit of Morgoth's power. Dispersed is the word Tolkien used.
Right.
Maybe put a little bit of his will into them. Maybe it's all of the above. Maybe there was crossbreeding going on that we don't really want to think about.
Yeah.
Maybe they're, yeah, exactly.
Nothing to see here, folks.
Nothing to see here, folks. Maybe he even thought maybe they're fallen Maiar. There's all kinds of different ideas that were suggested at different times in different essays that Christopher Tolkien neatly puts all together. But there's just not one that he settled on. There's just all these different possibilities.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what? We could have gone into that back when we talked about the origin of the orcs way back.
We could have,
But we didn't, partly because it's really unpleasant. And partly because we just really wanted to stick to the published version of the Silmarillion, which says they came from elves.
Right.
This is our walkthrough is on the Silmarillion, not on the history of Middle-earth. So we use the latter to amplify and help understand the former, but we're not walking through the histories.
Right, exactly.
So, we do know that they can't have been bred from men, at least not in the timeline that we understand things to be, because elves and orcs were already fighting before the sun first rose, which is when men woke up. So that's not the case. What do you think about any of the others?
Well, I mean, I think I tend to side with the finished works.
Yeah.
Anytime, just I got to pick something, I'll side with the finished works. And so I do. I still kind of stick to the Silmarillion. Because it's the only thing that works with the timeline, as you just said.
Yeah.
There's also some stuff in that Morgoth's Ring section that
explains how it could have still been elves and not been and have them not be immortal. There's some stuff in there about the corrupting power of Melkor, which I just mentioned a moment ago. I knew I had it on my mind for some reason. But he talked about how the corrupting power of Melkor starts on a moral level, a theological level in the spirit, and then it starts to affect the body. He says that anyone who would have followed Morgoth, would have eventually become corrupted in all parts of its being, the Fëa dragging down the Hroa in its descent into Morgothism. So what we have here is basically any person, elf or man, who had given herself over to that degree of evil, that would have taken its toll on their body as well. Okay. Keep in mind that the elves aren't really immortal. They just have enormously long
serial longevity. Is the phrase.
In this same paragraph, he says enormously long lives, and they were themselves physically wearing out and suffering a slow, progressive weakening. Yeah, the fading that we talk about. So it could be that this corruption of Melkor wasn't changing their nature, but it was accelerating their normally slow weakening.
Oh, I see.
And so it would just corrupt them faster and turn them into, basically turn them into creatures who are mortal and who are corrupted. So it's certainly not definitive. I don't think Tolkien wanted it to be definitive, but there are explanations for how they could have still come from elves and not been immortal. I guess is where I'm landing on it. And so that's why I kind of stick to that.
I think that's where I'm at as well. The point is that while there are a lot of possibilities, Tolkien didn't rule out the possibility that orcs came from elves, clearly, or it wouldn't have been in the Silmarillion. But he did state very clearly that if they were elves, they were not immortal in the same way as elves. Now, that
was something he was very adamant about.
Very adamant about that. I know that answer is not going to satisfy everyone, but let's get on with our discussion anyway.
We probably should, yeah.
Or almost.
Almost, yes, indeed, because we've got a little something to talk about here.
Yeah.
By now, if you've listened to the last couple of episodes, or if you've been following us on social media, you know that we have some hugely exciting plans for the Prancing Pony podcast, and that our Patreon campaign is a big part of that. We just wanted to take a minute to mention that again here on the show, so that if you're not connected with us on social media, you can find out more.
That's right. We have some really cool rewards. We've been working on this for a while. We've come up with things like access to patron-only updates, access to exclusive bonus episodes and content, stickers, buttons, T-shirts, pint glasses, mailbag priority, signed postcards, being our guest on a new Q&A episode called Questions After Nightfall, and being our guest on a new segment called The North Wing, and even choosing a topic for a special episode.
Yeah, a lot of fun stuff that I'm really looking forward to.
Really fun.
And as enough of our listeners join our exclusive supporter community on Patreon, we will hit goals. We have goals set along the way, and those goals are actually going to be exciting and rewarding for everyone because they're going to include things like moving to weekly episodes, recording a live episode at a Tolkien Moot or a convention near you. A lot of different things we have planned.
Absolutely. So check out the rewards and what we're doing over at patreon.com/prancingponypod. That's our Twitter handle. So it's patreon.com/prancingponypod. And with enough of you listeners coming on board, we can do some amazing things.
Yes, we can. And there's one other thing we wanted to mention really quickly, one other thing we'd like to ask you to do for us. We have a survey from our podcast host that will help us get a better idea of who our audience is.
Yeah.
It's a short survey. It only takes about 30 seconds to complete.
And that's if you're really thorough.
Right.
It's really fast, I promise.
It's really short. But we need to have 250 responses on this. We need
that's a lot.
250 of you to complete this for us. So please go to survey.libsyn.com/The Prancing Pony Podcast. That's survey.libsyn.com/The Prancing Pony Podcast, and fill it out. We promise you that Alan and I are the only ones who will get your email addresses. The demographic data is only gathered in aggregate, so your privacy is guaranteed, and we really would appreciate it if you help us out and complete the survey. Yeah. And if you missed me saying the link, just check our show notes. We'll have it posted there as well. And again, thank you so much in advance.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And you know what? We're working on finding a prize to offer in a drawing once we've had 250 completed surveys. So be sure to use an email address that we can reach you at, because we're thinking about a copy of the new Beren and Luthien book, maybe.
Yeah.
So that would be a great prize. Well, then, let's get on with the last half of the last chapter of the last section of the Silmarillion.
I can't believe we're finally here.
All right. Well, then I guess we'll start as we usually do at the very beginning, because it is a very good place to start. So the third age begins.
I thought you might not say it that time, but
I'm always going to say it. That's what makes the inside jokes funny. We keep saying them.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're getting old, all you can do is say the same thing over and over
All you can do
again.
is say the same jokes over and over again because you can't remember new jokes.
I can't remember new ones. No.
Yeah.
So the third age begins right when we last left our heroes. Isildur had cut the ruling ring from the hand of Sauron. What would he do now? Well, we're going to find out real quickly.
We are.
But first, we're going to find out what happened with the servants of Sauron. The servants of Sauron were routed and dispersed, yet they were not wholly destroyed. And though many men turned now from evil and became subject to the heirs of Elendil, yet many more remembered Sauron in their hearts and hated the kingdoms of the West. The Dark Tower was leveled to the ground, yet its foundations remained, and it was not forgotten. The Númenóreans indeed set a guard upon the land of Mordor, but none dared dwell there because of the terror of the memory of Sauron, and because of the mountain of fire that stood nigh to Barad-dûr, and the valley of Gorgoroth was filled with ash. Many of the elves, and many of the Númenóreans, and of men who were their allies, had perished in the battle and the siege, and Elendil the Tall and Gil-galad the High King were no more. Never again was such a host assembled, nor was there any such league of elves and men, for after Elendil's day the two kindreds became estranged. So a few things here, right? The Dark Tower leveled, but the foundations
remained, though. Yeah.
What was up with that?
They just did not finish the job.
They didn't want to hire the demolition contractor necessary to get rid of that thing?
Well, it's I don't know. It was really hard to get Orc and Haradrim contractors out there to.
I'm
to
sure
do that.
It was, and the environmental impact statements hadn't been filed.
Right. Exactly.
You just don't know what kind of toxic stuff is in there. You don't want to release that into the atmosphere.
No, exactly.
I love
Seriously,
this.
though, I mean, it's like don't leave a job unfinished in Middle Earth.
Seriously, just get the job done. But
yeah,
I like that. It's interesting that nobody wanted to dwell there because of the terror of the memory of Sauron, but also the volcano.
Also because of the big volcano that's there.
That would pretty much do it for me.
Yeah.
I mean, active volcano. Other than the island of Hawaii, I'm not sure where I would want to live that would be near an active volcano.
No. Maybe Pompeii before. Sounds like it was a nice place, but
well, yeah.
They're always a nice place before.
Before, that's right. I can't help but land on the last line. Go ahead.
Well, this wasn't a pretty place near a volcano. The Valley of Gorgoroth was filled with ash.
Exactly. This was not the island of Hawaii.
This is not a place you simply walk into.
Oh.
Sorry,
it took us 48 episodes to get that in.
To get one of those in, I know.
To get Sean Bean would be proud of you.
You said you are or you are not?
I said Sean Bean would be proud of you.
Oh, Sean Bean would be proud. Oh, okay, yeah. I thought you said Sean, I am so proud of you. I was like, I don't know why.
No, I'm ashamed. I'm actually mortified, deeply embarrassed.
No, well, I'm with the rest of the Seans on this one.
And taking applications for your replacement.
No, that was a good joke.
That was a good one. I'm sorry. No, that was really good.
By my jokes, are this podcast? No, I can't even finish that. You know where I'm going with that, but I don't have anything.
By my jokes, are your podcast kept funny?
Is your podcast maintained? Whatever. Kept funny.
You have my pun.
And my quip.
Oh.
And my bon mot.
Oh, wow. That's really well done.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I don't know how we're going to top that. I can't help but land on this last line, though, that the two kindreds became estranged. Was this really because, as we'll find out later, that Isildur didn't destroy the ring? Is that why?
I wonder.
Why did they become estranged? I mean, I guess we'll see some other things that might lead to that. The fact that eventually the lines kind of fade. The northern line in exile ends up in petty realms. The southern realm, the line of kings, dies out, and you've got the stewards. They're mingled with the blood of lesser men. So maybe that's why. But I would have liked to know more. Why the elves decided that being estranged from the men, I don't know. Maybe it was all that human sacrifice that they'd done.
We just can't get past the human
We just
sacrifice.
can't get
guys.
past
Sorry.
that. I know that wasn't you. It was just your cousins and stuff, but still. Yeah. So go ahead and take the next paragraph, because I think this really is part of the reason why.
Yep, I will do that if I can
Or
get
the
my
next
ebook
part
open.
of the next paragraph, I should
Yeah,
say.
if I can get my ebook open, I will do that.
Oh,
Okay,
well,
here we
you know,
go.
that would be a handy thing to have.
It would, yes. Are we recording a podcast today? I had no idea.
I don't know.
Okay.
Did I push the record button? I hope so.
I'm starting to hope not. All right, here we go. The ruling ring passed out of the knowledge even of the wise in that age, yet it was not unmade, for Isildur would not surrender it to Elrond and Círdan, who stood by. They counseled him to cast it into the fire of Orad Ruin, nigh at hand, in which it had been forged, so that it should perish, and the power of Sauron be forever diminished, and he should remain only as a shadow of malice in the wilderness. But Isildur refused this counsel, saying, "This I will have as weregild for my father's death, and my brother's. Was it not I that dealt the enemy his death blow?" And the ring that he held seemed to him exceedingly fair to look on, and he would not suffer it to be destroyed.
Yeah, this probably was part of it. I mean, Elrond and Círdan, probably two of the wisest, and certainly, I mean, Círdan's been around a while. He kind of knows things. Suggest, hey, you know what? Why don't we just go ahead and get rid of this thing forever so that Sauron can never come back? It's a pretty ring. It's a pretty ring, and my brother and father died, so no. Well, I guess I can understand now why Elrond's kind of a little upset with the world of men.
Yeah, I think so. Disappointed, you know.
Yeah, I think so.
Disappointed in not listening to good counsel because, you know.
Yeah. As we all know, listening to good counsel is a very important thing.
And didn't we determine that Elrond and Gil-galad were the new Melian?
Yeah, definitely. Nobody listens to them.
Yeah.
He's just the carrying on Melian into the third age. The spirit of Melian endures.
Yep. Indeed.
I do want to do a quick little sidebar on the word weregild. I think most people kind of grasp the concept. I mean, just even in context, you could have said, "This I will have as blah, 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 blah for my father's death," and you would probably know what it meant. But I want to actually, talk about the word, because we have enough word nerdery on the show, and usually I let Sean handle it. But this time around, I looked it up. I mean, I knew what it meant.
I was
researched
impressed. I was impressed that you pulled this one up.
Well,
I'm glad you did. I would have if you hadn't.
There you go. Of course, because it's good to have a safety net. Weregild was also known as man price, and think about this: like werewolf. Okay, where is man? So, man guild, and geld means payment or fee, like the Dane Guild. Okay, so man price. So it's the value placed on every person and even on property. If something's stolen or a person in your family is hurt or killed, the guilty person pays weregild as restitution. The Danish geld and Norwegian geld have a similar meaning, debt, like, it's money that's owed. And that word survives into English as yield. So this wasn't a stretch. This was really a legitimate claim on his part. His brother and his father were killed by this guy. So he had absolutely every right to say, "I will take this as the weregild, as the man price on my father, who is the king." And, the weregild was always higher for nobility.
For nobility, right.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
They had a basic price that everybody was worth. And if you killed a commoner, and you had to pay that weregild.
Right.
But if you killed a noble, it was even more. And if you killed the king, oh my goodness.
Right, exactly. And so this is, a king of Númenóreans. Of course, the weregild would be something very, very high. And I think the weregild was, sort of a matter of honor, really. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was put in place as a way to stop people just killing each other.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It was designed to do exactly that.
And so it did become sort of a matter of honor. You could demand satisfaction by being paid off instead of, challenging someone to a duel for killing someone that was close to you. So, I think this is, I think it's definitely apt. And I think it's a matter of honor as much as it is, love for his father and his brother that are dead.
I agree. So we see in the next part that we're not going to read. We'll get to a little bit of this part later, but we see the famous part from the extended edition of the films, where he travels from Gondor to his father's realm and is attacked by orcs. You had something to say on that, I think.
Well, just I think I just wanted to point out. I always have trouble remembering who's king where. I don't know why. I just have a weird weird mental block on this. So let's just remember that Isildur was co-ruler in Gondor with his brother Anarion.
Anarion, right.
And then Elendil, their father, was the king in Arnor in the north.
Which was the northern realm, yeah.
Right. That was always sort of the senior throne, the High King's throne. And so with Elendil dead, Isildur moves north, or intends to move north to succeed his father on that throne, leaving Gondor to his brother's son. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there as just to kind of set the stage for what's happening here.
Yeah, no, that's important, and we'll get more on that. He's betrayed by the ring and he dies like we see in the films, but not quite like in the films. I'm going to bring in some passages from the Disaster of the Gladden Fields, which is in Unfinished Tales. Let's see. Okay, so if you have Unfinished Tales, take a look. It's in Part 3, The Third Age. The first section there is called The Disaster of the Gladden Fields, and we learn a lot about his journey north, the reasoning behind it, and what happened. I'm going to read several pieces from this. They're scattered, and I'll try to explain what happens in between. But so I'm going to give you basically the brief summary.
Since I've got my book in front of me, this all starts on page 271.
Oh, thank you for mentioning that.
Of our edition of Unfinished Tales.
Of Unfinished Tales. That's good, and that's the same version of the book that for the Silmarillion. It's that paperback black one, right?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay, good. And we have show notes. We have a link for that in the show notes, right?
Yep, we do.
All right, very good.
It's in our official library. It's actually in the show notes for this episode, and it's in our official library tab.
Definitely a book you should. I mean, we told you to get that a long time ago for the 2-hour episode. So if you don't have it by now, I don't know what we can do for you.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe we'll make that a prize for a giveaway at some point later on. But
that's an idea.
For now, let's start digging in. I'm going to go ahead and read these sections, and I'll probably stop here and there and have you throw in a few comments. But after the fall of Sauron, Isildur, the son and heir of Elendil, returned to Gondor. There he assumed the Elendilmere as king of Arnor. Now, I should probably break real quick and explain what the Elendilmere is. That's the white star of elvish crystal that sits on the mithril, kind of not crown. It's a fillet, you know. So it's the token of royalty of the North Kingdom. So very important piece. So he takes that and assumes
it was
that.
Actually, and it was something. It's not the same one, but it was something that the later kings of Numenor had worn also. It's not again not the same one, but it was something that
that one I think wasn't it? Wasn't no, not the kings of Numenor. I was thinking because there's yet a third one that shows up, which is the one that Aragorn wears. That We'll get to how that happened too.
yeah, we'll get to those two.
That here.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, we will. So as he assumed the Elendilmere as king of Arnor and proclaimed his sovereign lordship over all the Dunedain in the north and in the south, for he was a man of great pride and vigor. He remained for a year in Gondor, restoring its order and defining its bounds. But the greater part of the army of Arnor returned to Eriador by the Númenórean road from the fords of Isen to Fornost. Now, just to catch you up with what that is, that's the road that runs to the west of the Misty Mountains, and it's that big north-south road that eventually runs by Bree and then goes all the way, the rest of the way north to Fornost. So when at last he felt free to return to his own realm, he was in haste, and he wished to go first to Imladris, for he had left his wife and youngest son there, and he had, moreover, an urgent need for the counsel of Elrond. So we see that they decide when they're going to go, and they head out. And with Isildur went his 3 sons, Elendur, Aratan, and Kirion, and his guard of 200 knights and soldiers, stern men of Arnor and war-hardened. So it's a pretty big party. As we're going to see, maybe not big enough. But
no, not quite.
Not
away,
quite.
that number 200 jumps out at me because this whole story just reminds me of like the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae. But
it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
No spoilers or anything.
No. No, of course not.
You know what? As you were talking, I was just looking up the Elendilmere. So there was a story about in Eldarion and Arendis, which is also in the Unfinished Tales. Arendis, the queen, asks her husband Eldarion, the king, to make something like her, which is basically just like the Elendilmere, but it is not the same gem. It's right. Anyway, so it was certainly not the same, but this was something that I guess has its roots in Númenórean royal fashion. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So they're heading up, the 200 guys, and they decide to go the other direction. They're going to go up the Anduin, and they want to head up that direction because they want to stop in. They want to stop it in Ladris. And the thing is, if they'd gone up, I know you think, well, isn't Rivendell on the west side of the mountains? And it is. But the problem is that the road goes so far out of the way because there really is no road to get to Rivendell. You have to go up to Bree and then hang a right. So they decide it's going to be shorter, significantly shorter, since they don't have horses, to go up the other side of the Misty Mountains and then cross over. So
that was a long way.
It is a long way. I'm trying to remember. There is a portion at one point where they talk about how long the journey is, and it's a long journey. But they get, they're probably about 3 weeks into the journey, I think. Oh no, further than that. Late in the afternoon of the 30th day that they're passing the north borders to Gladden Fields. So they're pretty far on their way. And then as the sun plunged into cloud, they heard the hideous cries of orcs and saw them issuing from the forest and moving down the slopes, yelling their war cries. In the dimmed light, their number could only be guessed, but the Dunedain were plainly many times, even to 10 times, outnumbered. Isildur commanded a Thangile to be drawn up, a shield wall of 2 serried ranks that could be bent back at either end if outflanked, until at need it became a closed ring. If the land had been flat or the slope in his favor, he would have formed his company into a Dirnaith and charged the orcs, hoping by the great strength of the Dunedain and their weapons to cleave a way through them and scatter them in dismay. But that could not now be done. A shadow of foreboding fell upon his heart. So let's look at that. I picked that passage to read specifically because we actually get a little bit of their military strategy, which we
I love
get.
that. Yeah, the battle formations.
Yeah, I should say tactics. Yeah, I love that. The Thangile, it means shield fence.
Yep.
And it's, it's the idea. It's exactly what it sounds like it is. There's, this fence of shields. There's the ability of it to turn around and become a circle.
And basically each man using his shield, the men sort of locking their shields together. So
shield
each
wall.
man is right, exactly. And each man is sort of protecting himself and the men next to him.
Yeah, you've got the front row is down on a knee with the shield in front of him. The second row leans their shields forward over the heads of the first guys, and the third row are going to hold their shields up above the second row. Yeah, and then so on. So you get this.
I mean, very classical battle tactic. I mean, this is one of those things that's been around forever.
Yeah,
I love to see that the Numenorians use it.
I know,
it's neat, and their name for it, of course.
Yeah, and then the other formation, the Dirnaith, which in Quenya would be Nerneta or man's spearhead, is a wedge formation. Right. So, it comes from the word Nith. Like the Ninth of Lorien, that's the land that's at the angle of the Celebrant and Anduin. So it's like this kind of arrow point is what that means. It's like a spearhead or a gore or a wedge. And so the idea would be to launch this wedge shape of men with spears at a formation in order to do massive damage. But he didn't have enough guys, and he had the wrong geography to do that.
Right.
So
that is awesome, and I'm disappointed that you're out word nerding me so much.
I'm sure that won't last for very long. That's probably the last of my word nerdery for the night. But I love military tactics. I'm not very knowledgeable. It's an area that I just love to study, Roman tactics, and I love that period of history in terms of finding out how they fought wars.
Yeah,
and it's just fascinating to see these military tactics.
I want to say, didn't the Rome? Well, we don't have to get into that, but I think the Romans actually did have something just like this, where they could
the phalanx,
not just the shield wall, but they could actually fold it back on one side to protect the flank if they needed to.
I wouldn't be surprised. I
don't know if they have that in.
I don't know if they have that in Rome Total War. I'll have to see. That's kind of that was the beginning of my curiosity.
I'll have to look that up and see if I can get to that. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, because normally you think about these lines and they're pretty inflexible. Right. And the minute you flank them, you've really got them. You get behind them and it's all over. So,
right.
But this one could be actually turned into a full-on circle, a closed ring if it needed to be. So, I mean, it would be less effective, obviously, at that point than when men are closer together with their shields, but still enough. But you had a bit. I mean, I know you talked about this earlier, reminding you of the 300 at Thermopylae, but This also reminded you of something else that we've touched on in the show before.
Now, another one of those classic Last Stand stories that we know from Tolkien, which is the Battle of Malden. We've talked a little bit about Beorhtnoth, Beorhthelm's son,
Okay.
and the Battle of Malden. That we talked about that piece. It's you usually find it in like it's Tree and Leaf or.
Was it Tree and Leaf? No, it was. Yeah.
It's in my Tree and Leaf. I think it's in some of the other ones, but
it's not in Tales from the Perilous Realm, as I found out to my humiliating dismay.
That's all right. But yeah, there's I don't know. It's just there's this. We've talked a bit about this story in the past. About this idea of Beorhtnoth. He was. Man, I'm trying to find my notes on this. Here we go.
You know what? I just realized that part of what you want to say, I know it because I think I know where you're going. It's probably something I should actually have you bring in after a couple little bit more passages. I was thinking of the military stuff, but I realized it's not about the tactics. It's about something else. So,
it's about the
Pride.
Stuff we'll get on the next page.
Pride.
So why don't I let you
look for your notes? I'll pull up the next couple passages. So
let's do that.
Sorry, folks. Sean will be back later.
I got to collect myself.
I can play some music.
Technical difficulties.
All right. So, he had hoped after they were able to repel the first attack, they had hoped that perhaps the Orcs would turn to run because the Orcs are typically pretty cowardly and would do that if they realized that they weren't going to have an easy victory. But he was wrong, and the text goes on to say that there was not only cunning in the attack, but fierce and relentless hatred. The Orcs of the mountains were stiffened and commanded by grim servants of Barad-dûr, sent out long before to watch the passes, and though it was unknown to them, the ring, cut from his black hand 2 years before, was still laden with Sauron's evil will and called to all his servants for their aid. Well, now that's creepy.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like carrying a homing device without realizing it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the fact that the ring was calling to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else in a note. It's note 20, which is in that passage you just read about how these orcs were actually, they probably thought that the war had been won by Sauron, so they were actually emboldened by seeing what they thought was probably just like this ragged band of survivors from who had fled the battle after Sauron won. And they thought they had nothing to lose. They were just looking for a way to kind of get themselves into their master's good graces. They had no idea. But it's interesting how that actually emboldened them as opposed to the opposite effect, making them afraid of these guys. Yeah, that's in note 20, which I thought that was fascinating.
Fascinating. Well, there was something else kind of fascinating on the military front. I'm not going to read the rest of the paragraph, but there's a line in here about the dreaded steel bows of Numenor. Now, I didn't think that they had that sort of technology, but apparently they do. If you look at the note for that, it has us then look up something in the description of Numenor. Now, we looked in that chapter when we talked about the Mental Tarma and the worship ceremonies that happened. But interestingly, there's a bit of a paragraph here talking about their weapons and what they have.
Mm-hmm. I know where you're going, yeah.
About their swords, and the new sword is made for the king's heir. But no man wore a sword in Numenor, and for long years few indeed were the weapons of warlike intent that were made in the land. Axes and spears and bows they had, and shooting with bows on foot and on horseback was a chief sport and pastime of the Numenorians. In later days, in the wars upon Middle-earth, it was the bows of the Numenorians that were most greatly feared. The men of the sea, it was said, send before them a great cloud, as a rain turned to serpents, or a black hail tipped with steel. And in those days, the great cohorts of the king's archers used bows made of hollow steel, with black feathered arrows a full ell long from point to notch. Now, an ell is 45 inches. So
that's long. That is a long arrow.
Over a 3.5 foot long arrow, shot by a bow made of hollow steel.
A hollow steel bow.
Man, that is amazing.
That would be scary.
That would be absolutely with a steel-tipped bow.
To see raining, see steel-tipped arrow. Yeah, to see those raining down on you.
3.5, almost 4 foot long arrows. Good golly, that's huge. I can't even imagine an arrow longer than a yardstick by a good 9 inches.
Yeah, I know.
That's huge.
Yeah.
But so obviously he didn't have very many of those archers, but the orcs were not stupid. They knew better than to get in their range, so they waited until nightfall. And then as there was a pause and it came closer, Isildur's son, Elendor, goes to him and says, Atarinya, what of the power that would cow these foul creatures and command them to obey you? Is it then of no avail? And then I love this. This is the line that to me makes Isildur radically different than the film version. Alas, it is not, Senya. I cannot use it. I dread the pain of touching it, and I have not yet found the strength to bend it to my will. It needs one greater than I now know myself to be. My pride has fallen. It should go to the keepers of the three. So he knows.
That's the one.
That's the line right there. And I dread the pain of touching it. You know, we see that, right? We talk about how I doubt I shall ever be free of the pain of it.
Right.
My hand is scorched, all that stuff. He dreads the pain of touching it. But this acknowledgement that he now knows, I'm not strong enough to use it. My pride is gone.
It was pride to take it.
It was pride to take it. Yep.
I should have done what Elrond and Círdan told me to do.
And now it has to go to since we can't destroy it now, it needs to go to the keepers of the three. Mm-hmm. And that's the important mission that he had in order he wanted to go see Elrond.
Right.
I would imagine that's also the other reason why they're going on this side, that they can go through Lorien first too.
Yeah. Yeah. So. And you're right. I mean, we totally miss that in the movies.
We do. And I understand why. I mean, you got to do Isildur in just like a minute and a half with no dialogue.
Yeah. And it was only even in the extended version where we even see this.
Yeah, where we see where we see him killed.
Yeah. So
or where we see him take the ring off. I think we see him killed in the irregular. I don't know. I only watched the extended.
I think you're right. I think we see him pierced by arrows,
shot.
Floating in the stream.
It's the taking it off the chain and putting it on.
We see him put the ring on.
Yeah, that's in the extended.
But and I know they didn't have time to give him a full arc or anything like that. But it is unfortunate because I think this is the part that really reminded me of Beorhtnoth, and I did find my notes on this.
Yes.
Because we've talked about Beorhtnoth's pride, or his Overmode. Yep. Is the word that we've used quite a bit.
Yeah, we tied it in with Turin quite a bit.
Right, quite a bit. And, there's a very direct comparison there involving the building of a bridge.
Right.
We've talked about him in regards to Feanor and things like that. One thing that I don't think we've really talked about is some of the things that Tolkien says about Beorhtnoth himself in that essay Overmode, which accompanies the story about the homecoming of Beorhtnoth. And I just want to pull a little bit in from that. So I guess
please do.
If you don't remember the story, go back to our episode 038, where we talked a little bit more about. Alan, you actually gave a really good summary of the story, but
it was towards the end too. So if was that our third of the Turin episode, so it's in the third hour of that episode.
I think it was the second because it was the fall of Nargothrond.
Yeah, probably right. But yeah, definitely towards the end.
But it ultimately came down to Beorhtnoth built a bridge because he wanted to have a, quote, fair fight or a noble fight. And in his pride, he had this bridge built for his enemies to cross. They had a fight. His people were slaughtered.
Yeah.
And so Tolkien says of Beorhtnoth in this Overmode essay, he says, why did Beorhtnoth do this? Owing to a defective character, no doubt, but a character we may surmise not only formed by nature, but molded also by aristocratic tradition. Beorhtnoth was chivalrous rather than strictly heroic.
Ooh.
Honor was in itself a motive, and he sought it at the risk of placing his very long Old English word that I'm not going to pronounce, all the men most dear to him in a truly heroic situation, which they could redeem only by death. Too foolish to be heroic, Tolkien says.
Too foolish to be heroic. Absolutely. In other words, he sets that honor above his duty.
Yeah.
Really. His
right.
obligation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. And I think it's motivated by pride that Beorhtnoth has of wanting to have this, this manly fight, this fight out in the open, like we saw with Turin. And it's a matter of honor as well. And I think we see this with Isildur. His actual sin, the actual thing he does, is different, very different. But it is still a sin of pride. Taking the ring was an act of pride, and this idea of weregild was a matter of honor.
When it's suggested that he destroy it,
that
and
he
it's
should
suggested
not,
by two very wise people. Be humble enough to recognize that their wisdom may be superior to your own.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So that's definitely pride, and I think the weregild that we talked about is really a matter of honor. And so I think his motives are very similar to Beorhtnoth's, and yet. Because Isildur has this realization that you just mentioned, he realizes his pride. And I think we'll see in probably the next passage you're going to read where he talks about forgive me and my pride that has
Yes.
brought you to this doom. Sorry to take that one from you.
That's
But
okay. No, don't worry about it.
you can really see that Tolkien is kind of inverting this trope a little bit to show Isildur actually being heroic before the
Yeah,
end.
absolutely. Not
And
not
he
chivalrous,
saw
but
the
heroic.
folly, and
Yeah.
he tried to get his men out of it, and unfortunately, it was just too
Yeah,
late.
exactly. He really did. We'll get to that text now, as a matter of fact. His son comes back to him again and says, "My king, Kirion is dead and Aratan is dying." So those are his two other sons. So this is just his last son. "Your last counselor must advise, nay, command you, as you commanded Otar," who he'd given the shards of Narsil and said, "Go." So his son's telling him now, "Go, take your burden, and at all costs bring it to the keepers, even at the cost of abandoning your men and me." "King's son," said Isildur, "I knew that I must do so, but I feared the pain. Nor could I go without your leave. Forgive me, and my pride that has brought you to this doom." Elendor kissed him. "Go, go now," he said. Isildur turned west, and drawing up the ring that hung in a wallet from a fine chain about his neck, he set it upon his finger with a cry of pain, and was never seen again by any eye upon Middle-earth. But the Elendilmere of the west could not be quenched, and suddenly it blazed forth red and wrathful as a burning star. Men and orcs gave way in fear, and Isildur, drawing a hood over his head, vanished into the night. I love that image. The idea of the Elendilmere, fully lit up. So he's invisible, but the
He's got
Elendilmere
this
is like,
big light.
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of negates the point. So he moves on, he runs, and then he gets to the river, and it's been a long journey just to get there, but he knows he's got to get across. So he stood for a while alone and in despair. Then in haste he cast off all his armor and weapons, save a short sword at his belt, and plunged into the water. He was a man of strength and endurance that few even of the Dunedain of that age could equal, but he had little hope to gain the other shore. Before he had gone far, he was forced to turn almost north against the current, and strive as he might, he was ever swept down towards the tangles of the Gladden Fields. They were nearer than he had thought, and even as he felt the stream slacken and had almost won across, he found himself struggling among great rushes and clinging weeds. There, suddenly, he knew that the ring had gone. By chance, or chance well used, it had left his hand and gone where he could never hope to find it again. At first, so overwhelming was his sense of loss that he struggled no more and would have sunk and drowned. But swift as it had come, the mood passed. The pain had left him. A great burden had been taken away. His feet found the riverbed, and heaving himself up out of the mud, he floundered through the reeds to a marshy islet close to the western shore. There he rose up out of the water, only a mortal man, a small creature lost and abandoned in the wilds of Middle-earth. But to the night-eyed orcs that lurked there on the watch, he loomed up, a monstrous shadow of fear with a piercing eye like a star. They loosed their poisoned arrows at it and fled, needlessly, for Isildur, unarmed, was pierced through heart and throat, and without a cry he fell back into the water. No trace of his body was ever found by elves or men. And thus Isildur passes. But again, we see that amazing, the burden is gone. He's at peace now. The ring is gone. He's so grateful for that. And yet, the Elendilmere is still on him, and it's like shining the flashlight, Everybody can see you shining the flashlight. It's a lot earlier than you'll see them with the light.
Then you can see them. Yeah.
And, it just becomes a big target marker for the orcs, and he dies. So,
yeah.
But I wanted to touch on one last... I just clicked on something and totally lost where I was at, but, we'll get back there real quick. Go ahead.
It's just that kind of night for us. Having a lot of technical difficulties.
It is just minor stuff, but, it's there.
Nothing major. Yeah.
So, no trace of his body was ever found by elves or men, and of course he'd lost everything. The only things he had on him still were that one short sword and then the Elendilmere. So we find out way down in the future, Aragorn, King Elisar, when he was crowned in Gondor, began the reordering of his realm, and one of his first tasks was the restoration of Orthanc, where he proposed to set up again the Palantir recovered from Saruman. So when he's in there and he's looking around, he finds a hidden door that he wouldn't have found if Gimli hadn't been with him. And he finds what looks like something that probably would have held the ring had Saruman ever gotten his hands on it.
Right.
But then next to that lay a treasure without price, long mourned as lost forever, the Elendilmere itself, the white star of elvish crystal upon a fillet of mithril that had descended from Silmarillion to Elendil, and had been taken by him as the token of royalty in the North Kingdom. Every king and the chieftains that followed them in Arnor had borne the Elendilmere down even to Elisar himself, but though it was a jewel of great beauty, made by elven smiths in Imladris for Valandil, Isildur's son, it had not the ancientry nor potency of the one that had been lost when Isildur fled into the dark and came back no more. So Saruman had obviously been doing a little searching with his metal detector by the side of the river.
Yeah,
there.
well, we find out later on that he was searching the Gladden Fields for the ring.
Yeah. So he found
Later
the
on.
Elendilmere, and it's
And
interesting.
took it and put it in his little secret
And yeah.
ring closet. His little
look at what I
casket that he
have.
made to put the ring in.
But here's an interesting thing then, because the text goes on to suggest that these couldn't have been found unless they had been on Isildur's body when he sank. But if that had been in deep water, they would have been swept far away. So he must have fallen into shallow water. So why then were there no traces of his bones? And the text actually speculates, had Saruman found them and scorned them, burned them with dishonor in one of his furnaces? If that were so, it was a shameful deed, but not his worst.
I love that passage. A shameful deed, but not his worst.
Isn't that just awful?
Because,
he's such a
it
horror.
is not his worst.
No,
I mean,
it's definitely not his worst. I mean, not when you realize what else he's done.
Betraying the Valar and breeding Uruk-hai and things like that, but still.
I think breeding Uruk-hai gets right on the list of terrible things.
I think so. But still a shameful deed, yeah. It's petty.
It is.
It's
just so
it's
petty.
a really petty thing to do.
It's so petty. But that's typical Saruman. So
yeah, it's so Saruman.
It really is. So I had that long, kind of chopped up segment. But now that we know what happened to Isildur, and we know what happened to the shards of Narsil that he gave to Otar, even though we didn't read that, Sean, why don't you tell us exactly what did happen with those shards?
All right. Thus Narsil came in due time to the hand of Valandil, Isildur's heir, in Imladris. But the blade was broken, and its light was extinguished, and it was not forged anew. And Master Elrond foretold that this would not be done until the ruling ring should be found again, and Sauron should return. But the hope of elves and men was that these things might never come to pass.
Yeah, why couldn't he foretell things like this won't happen until a week from Thursday? I mean, that's a whole lot better than this thing won't happen unless this horrible other thing that nobody wants to happen. Yeah. I mean, it's
more poetic that way. Come on.
It is. It's far more dramatic, far more. Yeah.
Worth noting, Valandil, Isildur's heir, was left in Imladris.
Yep. We learned that earlier when we find out about the journey. He wants to head up there because his wife and son are there.
Right.
His wife and youngest son, because his other three sons are with him and they're not anymore.
Not anymore. No, they did not make it. But
no.
But yeah, so this was something that the kings of the Dunedain were doing for a long time.
Yeah, they'd obviously been passing these broken pieces of the sword down from generation to generation.
Right.
So
right.
Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what happened after that, though. I'm going to go ahead and take the rest of this paragraph.
Okay.
Not the rest of the next one. I'm going to pick up in the middle.
Yeah. Right.
And it came to pass after the days of Eorendur, the seventh king that followed Valandil, that the men of Western Es, the Dunedain of the north, became divided into petty realms and lordships, and their foes devoured them one by one. Ever they dwindled with the years, until their glory passed, leaving only green mounds in the grass. At length naught was left of them but a strange people wandering secretly in the wild, and other men knew not their homes nor the purpose of their journeys, and save in Imladris, in the house of Elrond, their ancestry was forgotten. Yet the shards of the sword were cherished during many lives of men by the heirs of Isildur, and their line, from father to son, remained unbroken. Very quick fall. I mean,
very, yeah. Certainly in Arnor.
Seven kings, and by this point, they're not living as long.
Right.
So that's not an exceedingly long amount of time. I don't have the timeline in front of me, but I want to say it's not more than about 300 years. Could be more than that.
I'll have to trust you on that one, but I know. I mean, it is very quick. I mean, we're told that there are too few people to people the land or maintain all the places that had been built. So it's it is a very, very rapid decline.
Yeah.
Sort of the opposite of what we'll see in Gondor.
Yeah, very much so. And yet it's very kind of mannish results, the fact that they became divided into these
The petty fracturing,
realms.
the three kingdoms. Yeah,
very much
yeah,
like
that's
men,
true.
just to kind of split apart like that.
Yeah.
Instead of being united against their foes. So their foes are devouring them one by one, and we know all about these realms. We learn more about them. Where is it that we learn more about all those, Rudar and
Appendix A.
yeah, that is Appendix A, of Lord of the Rings. Yeah, it's very sad.
Because some of the Witch King's history is tied up with this stuff too.
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah,
he'd
and
gone to
anymore.
war with Arthedain, I think, which was
Yes.
one of the three kingdoms.
Yeah, one of those. Yep, absolutely. And of course, we see not their names, but we see the Rangers, these strange people wandering secretly in the wild,
Yep.
and that their line continues from father to son. But what happens in the southern realm?
Something a little bit different. I'll go ahead and read that next paragraph. In the south, the realm of Gondor endured, and for a time its splendor grew, until it recalled the wealth and majesty of Numenor ere it fell. High towers the people of Gondor built, and strong places, and havens of many ships, and the winged crown of the kings of men was held in awe by people of many lands and tongues. For many a year the white tree grew before the king's house in Minas Anor, the seed of that tree which Isildur brought out of the deeps of the sea from Numenor, and the seed before that came from Avalone, and before that from Valinor, in the day before days when the world was young.
I love that, the history of the tree again, and
Yeah.
we see that so many times. It's definitely worth noting.
Yeah, definitely.
Keep in mind
But here-
that when you talk about Minas Anor, that's the place that. Oh no, that's Minas Tirith. That's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Minas Ithil, which
Yeah,
would
that's
later,
true.
which later becomes something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
My
No,
mistake.
for some reason I was thinking at one time, did we see this in the last episode that the tree was originally planted in Minas Ithil?
I thought so.
Because
Let's
Isildur had
see.
planted it?
Yeah. Let's see
Yeah.
here. No, it
So
was
it mu-
Anor. It was Anor. Minas Anor.
It was?
Yeah. I'm looking at it right here at the beginning of the passage that we read tonight, that thus began the third age of the world. For long the white tree of the Eldar flowered in the courts of the kings of men, for the seedling which he had saved, Isildur planted in the citadel of Anor in memory of his brother ere he departed from Gondor.
I think I probably totally misspoke in our last episode, and I said that Minas Anor had turned into Minas Morgul, which is completely wrong.
It's Minas Ithil that turns into Minas Morgul.
Right.
That's
yeah.
possible. I think I would have caught that.
Yeah,
I hope
don't
I
remember.
would have caught that.
Well, if I said that last episode, folks, it was late. I made a mistake, and I know what it's supposed to be. So
There you go. And so do you. So do all of you out there listening.
exactly.
But we see the descendants of that tree. So we see the history of that tree. From Valinor to Avalone and to Numenor, and now all the way to Minas Anor.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we do learn that the blood wanes, the blood mingles, and everything wanes. We're not going to read that paragraph, but that line is worth looking at, that their power and wisdom was diminished and their lifespan was shortened. That sounds really familiar, because in the last chapter, the text was they were given wisdom and power and life more enduring. And here their power
Right.
and wisdom is diminished and lifespan is shortened. So exactly the three gifts that they were given are being taken away. As
Taken
their
away
blood
from them. Wow.
is
yeah.
mingled with other men. Exactly all three, and no more and no less. So they start to weaken a little bit, but then a plague comes that wipes out a lot of folks, and that's when we'll pick up the next little bit here. The forts on the borders of Mordor were deserted, and Minas Ithil was emptied of its people. And evil entered again into the Black Land secretly, and the ashes of Gorgoroth were stirred as by a cold wind, for dark shapes gathered there. It is said that these were indeed the Ulairi, whom Sauron called the Nazgul, the 9 ring-wraiths that had long remained hidden, but returned now to prepare the ways of their master, for he had begun to grow again. And in the days of Eärnil they made their first stroke, and they came by night out of Mordor over the passes of the mountains of shadow, and took Minas Ithil for their abode, and they made it a place of such dread that none dared to look upon it. Thereafter it was called Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery, and Minas Morgul was ever at war with Minas Anor in the west. Then Osgiliath, which in the waning of the people had long been deserted, became a place of ruins and a city of ghosts. But Minas Anor endured, and it was named anew Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard. For there the kings caused to be built in the citadel a white tower, very tall and fair, and its eye was upon many lands. Proud still and strong was that city, and in it the white tree still flowered for a while before the house of the kings. And there the remnant of the Númenóreans still defended the passage of the river against the terrors of Minas Morgul, and against all the enemies of the west, orcs and monsters and evil men. And thus the lands behind them, west of Anduin, were protected from war and destruction.
So by the blood of their people were
the other lands kept free.
Safe. Yeah, exactly. That's nice. I like that we were both right there with that.
Yes, we were. Couldn't help but hear it. Of course, I also couldn't help but hear something else when the Osgiliath became a place of ruins and a city of ghosts.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but hear that either. Nope. Some things are better to hear.
By the way, I am not crazy. In last episode, we did see that there was a tree in Minas Ithil. Sauron took Minas Ithil.
Yep.
And Isildur escaped, and he took a seedling of the tree.
Yeah.
So, okay, I am not crazy, and I did not say that Minas Anor turned into Minas Morgul last time. I had to save face on that. I was like, I can't believe I made that mistake.
That's what I thought too. I was thinking, but there was a tree there. When did it get taken? Right. When did they move a seedling over there? But
they're always moving seedlings, man. There's
seriously,
how many seedlings have there been?
Anyway. Yeah.
All right, I'm not crazy. I know my Ithil from my Anor.
Speaking of which, both of those were built to protect Osgiliath.
Isn't that fascinating? They were built, like facing outward, basically, to protect Osgiliath in the middle. Mm-hmm. From invaders from outside, and
from the remnants of Mordor on the one side, and then the wild men on the other. Yeah,
right. And now all of a sudden they're both facing inward, looking across this this battleground with Osgiliath in the middle. It's a
dead abandoned
very,
city.
Very interesting inversion of that.
It really, really is. That's such an excellent point, and I don't know that I would have caught that, but. Okay, so I've got a little bit for you to read about Eärnur, but before you do, we're not going to read this bit, but he does go out into single combat with the Witch King, with the Morgul.
The Witch King, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not his best decision ever?
I don't know. Maybe he grew up reading stories about Fingolfin or something and decided to go,
I guess.
Challenge.
I don't know. Just never trust a Nazgul. That's,
no.
I mean, this is not a good idea, but... So he never shows up again. So what happens after that?
No. So he disappears, and then I'll take this next part of the paragraph. Now Eärnur left no heir, but when the line of the kings failed, the stewards of the house of Mardil the Faithful ruled the city and its ever-shrinking realm. And the Rohirrim, the horsemen of the north, came and dwelt in the green land of Rohan, which before was named Calanarthon, and was a part of the kingdom of Gondor. And the Rohirrim aided the lords of the city in their wars. And northward, beyond the falls of Rauros and the gates of Argonath, there were as yet other defenses, powers more ancient, of which men knew little, against whom the things of evil did not dare to move, until in the ripening of time their dark lord Sauron should come forth again.
Interesting.
A lot of cool stuff there.
Yeah, I wonder what those powers more ancient are.
Gee, I wonder, are they maybe elves?
Falls of Rauros and the gates of Argonath, other defenses. Well, Lothlorien would be up that direction. Yeah, yep. Indeed. Okay, so I wish we had the time to explore the section in Unfinished Tales about Eorl and the coming of the Rohirrim.
That's a really cool one. Cirion and Eorl.
Yeah, Cirion and Eorl. Yeah. But we just don't have the time, so we're gonna recommend that to you.
Yeah.
Please take a look at that. But
we also get in this paragraph, though, the start of the line of the ruling stewards.
Yes, we do. Mardil the Faithful. Yeah,
which led to Denethor, in the War of the Rings. So all of this stuff is wrapped up with. It's all wrapped up with the history of Lord of the Rings, basically.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This is also the first mention of the Argonath. I wish that we got more on that. I don't know that there's any description of it other than what we get in the Lord of the Rings, or any background on, my goodness, how they built that.
I don't think so. No.
But yeah, it is the first time we see the Argonath. So good stuff. Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look. In the meantime, what's happening with the elves, right? I mean, this is a book about elves. This is the Silmarillion. Shouldn't we be finding out about the elves? Well, it is the time of men.
Those powers more ancient we were talking about.
Those powers more ancient. Let's find out. So in all the days of the Third Age, after the fall of Gil-galad, Master Elrond abode in Imladris, and he gathered there many elves and other folk of wisdom and power from among all the kindreds of Middle-earth. And he preserved through many lives of men the memory of all that had been fair. And the house of Elrond was a refuge for the weary and the oppressed, and a treasury of good counsel and wise lore. In that house were harbored the heirs of Isildur, in childhood and old age, because of the kinship of their blood with Elrond himself, and because he knew in his wisdom that one should come of their line to whom a great part was appointed in the last deeds of that age. And until that time came, the shards of Elendil's sword were given into the keeping of Elrond, when the days of the Dunedain darkened, and they became a wandering people. Okay. So Elrond really does become kind of the central hub, or Imladris does, and Elrond is kind of taken over the role of Gil-galad, hasn't he? I mean,
yeah, he does.
Officially.
I mean, he doesn't. He never calls himself king. You know, Gil-galad was always the High King of the Noldor and Middle Earth, and Elrond never calls himself that. Even though, I don't know, I mean, maybe technically he would have some claim to it because he does descend from Turgon.
That's true. That's true.
But he never does. He's always just the Lord of Imladris. But regardless, Imladris or Rivendell becomes, the place where all the Noldor tend to congregate.
Yeah.
And obviously the last homely house and all that stuff we see in the Third Age, it becomes, the place where elves kind of tend to stop, hang out for a bit on their way west to the Grey Havens and so forth. So.
Yeah. Speaking of the Grey Havens, we learned that that's where there are still a few folk left of Gil-galad's people, and that Círdan's the one in charge there. He's the Lord of the Havens.
Right.
I wanted to, before we moved on to the next bit, and I've got a paragraph for you to take. I wanted to also mention, we talked about the elves being the powers more ancient, and I think they are. I think especially Galadriel, because Lothlorien is directly north of the Falls of Rauros and the Gates of Argonath. But I also have to say that Fangorn's to the north too. It's just to the northwest, and I think that might also be a defense.
That's a good point.
A power more ancient of which men knew little. I don't know. That's just speculation.
That's a good point.
But I think
that's a good point. I mean, it could be both. It could be all the above. I mean, we certainly know that men by the Third Age don't know much about Lothlorien or Fangorn. And
those are both very mysterious.
We look at sort of the Rohirrims and the Gondorians' reaction to mentioning these places. They're
the Witch of the Golden Wood and
exactly
crazy stories about the Ents.
Yeah, all the scary. These are too scary. These are like the scary forests.
Yeah,
almost like
you're right.
Almost like the old forest is to the hobbits. These are the scary places that they don't want to go.
So come.
Yeah, so it could be both, but if it is both, I think it's all the more interesting that these are both places against which Sauron's forces would not dare to move.
Yeah.
Because it kind of reminds you, even though men might be scared of these places and misunderstand them, these are firmly on the side of good, as we end up finding out in the War of the Ring.
Absolutely. Well, we've learned about where Elrond is. Oh, thank you. Every once in a while. What's a broken clock twice a day, right? Yeah. So we've learned about Elrond and we've learned about Gil-galad. You've got a little bit here in this paragraph that tells us what's going on with Galadriel.
Yeah. Galadriel and the rings. So let me go ahead. Of the 3 rings that the elves had preserved unsullied, no open word was ever spoken among the wise, and few even of the Eldar knew where they were bestowed. Yet after the fall of Sauron their power was ever at work, and where they abode there mirth also dwelt, and all things were unstained by the griefs of time. Therefore, ere the Third Age was ended, the elves perceived that the Ring of Sapphire was with Elrond in the fair valley of Rivendell, upon whose house the stars of heaven most brightly shone. Whereas the Ring of Adamant was in the land of Lorien, where dwelt the lady Galadriel. A queen she was of the woodland elves, the wife of Celeborn of Doriath. Yet she herself was of the Noldor, and remembered the day before days in Valinor, and she was the mightiest and fairest of all the elves that remained in Middle-earth. But the red ring remained hidden until the end, and none save Elrond and Galadriel and Círdan knew to whom it had been committed.
What a description of Galadriel.
What a description indeed. Yeah, let us never forget how powerful and important she is.
The day before days. She remembered the day before days in Valinor. The mightiest and fairest of all the elves that remained.
and we've talked about how old she really is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, she's
I
been
once
around
did
since
the
the
math.
beginning.
It's a
I
long
remember
time.
I remember you doing the math. Something like 40,000 years, over
I can't
40,000
remember, but it
years.
was a lot. And a lot of it's depending on, I mean, there's two different calculations. It all depends
Sure,
on whether
yeah.
you go with the Annals of Aman or the Annals of Valinor. But
Right.
in terms of the first age timeline prior to the trees. But yeah,
But you
she's
know what?
been around a long time.
The day before days, I think, is really all we need to know as
Yeah.
humans. That's
Yeah.
all
The
our
day
mortal
before
minds
days,
can grasp.
That's
you
pretty
know?
much forever for us.
Yeah.
She's been around a very, very long time.
Mm.
But as we'll see, like with the other elven rings, these are rings of power that preserve, that protect.
Yes. Yeah,
and we'll touch more on that later. But I want to make sure we understand that her might is in preservation.
Is in preservation, and the same with exactly
same with
the same with
Elrond,
Elrond, same with all the elven rings.
And the other ring that shall remain unidentified for now.
At least for a few more minutes.
Yeah, for like another 10 minutes. So we get that the bliss and beauty of the elves remain still undiminished, and that nothing, no evil thing could go there.
Yep.
But I'm going to go ahead and pick up the rest of that paragraph and some of the next. Yet many voices were heard among the elves foreboding that, if Sauron should come again, then either he would find the ruling ring that was lost, or, at the best, his enemies would discover it and destroy it. But in either chance, the powers of the three must then fail, and all things maintained by them must fade. And so the elves should pass into the twilight, and the dominion of men begin. And so indeed it has since befallen. The 1 and the 7 and the 9 are destroyed, and the 3 have passed away, and with them the third age is ended, and the tales of the Eldar in Middle-earth draw to their close. Those were the fading years, and in them the last flowering of the elves east of the sea came to its winter. In that time the Noldor walked still in the hitherlands, mightiest and fairest of the children of the world, and their tongues were still heard by mortal ears.
Mm.
Oh, goodness.
I love that passage.
It is. I do too. It's so beautiful. Poignant, but beautiful.
Very. I don't know why. It makes me sad.
Yeah. That's, I mean, I such a great line for Sam. And it should make us sad that these amazing
that the elves are passing
beings are leaving Middle-earth.
Mm-hmm.
That now their tales draw to a close, and it's the dominion of men.
Mm-hmm. And I love this phrase, dominion of men. We see it a few times throughout the Legendarium. It's such a powerful phrase because to me, I almost see the Legendarium really is sort of the origin story of the dominion of men. It's really all about everything that happened up to the point where, men take over as the rulers of this earth, and our own history begins. And I love that. I love these little references throughout to this as sort of this faded world, and you even get a little bit of that. Indeed, it has since befallen. The 1 and the 7 and the 9 are destroyed.
Even though the story's not over yet, he's kind of leaping ahead a few pages to say, this is exactly what's happened.
Yeah, It's a reminder that this is an account that was written, after the events of the Lord of the Rings. It's just so cool.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It does give it essentially spoils the rest of the story, but we know that. We know that not just because we've read it, but because we're reading a history that is a history of this ancient time that came before men.
Right. Yeah.
And my goodness, you almost wonder what would have happened had Celebrimbor never made the 3. The ring's never been made at all. Had Sauron not made the 1, and he fought like a normal Dark Lord without the power of the ring. The reason I say that is, the 3 have passed away, and it's their failing that the things that maintained by them must fade. So would the fading have happened earlier? It's
an interesting question.
I don't know. Obviously their power was in preservation, and so my thought is, the fading would have begun even sooner had it not been for the power of the 3.
That's a really fascinating thought, because that suggests that the entire creation of the rings was
a way to
delay this dominion of men. It was
they weren't ready yet.
The Maya and the Eldar kind of almost subconsciously creating something to delay their eventual passing into myth.
It's like the
a
shadow
really
and
cool thought.
the shadow and the Vorlons, trying to make sure that men don't that
Yeah.
these young races don't figure it out.
Right. Yeah, that's a really brilliant point. I would.
It's an interesting
should-
thought, isn't it?
That is a really interesting thought. You should think
Maybe
about
write
that for a pondering or
write
something.
a pondering, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Alan.
That'll be an interesting one. I'll have to think about that. My goodness. So of course, even though there's this preservation in these areas, there's a lot of areas, of course, that aren't protected. So there's a lot of evil and dread about. You know, we read. We're not going to read that, but there's things like orcs and trolls and dragons and fell beasts, and those aren't fell beasts with a capital F, capital B that fly around.
No.
These are just
Right.
dangerous
No.
beasts.
Just
Exactly.
evil monsters.
But then Sauron arises in Mirkwood again. So it used to be called Greenwood. We get the name of a king, the realm of King Thranduil,
Thranduil. Yay.
he of the 27-point elk or moose.
Yep.
The
He who shall
beheading
not be
elk.
named
Yeah.
in the Hobbit.
He who shall not be named in The Hobbit. You are correct. We will get through an entire set of episodes and never mention his name, maybe.
We'll try not to.
I doubt we will, because there's going to be a few other names that aren't mentioned that will get mentioned.
Yeah, that is true.
There's at least one. Oh, man. And, Alfred might get a mention, too, when we get to
Let's
Dale.
not. Let's not mention Alfred.
say we did. Let's not discuss Alfred. Better if we didn't.
Man. Yeah.
So, obviously we can't be...
We may very well also mention the name of a guy who's mentioned in this next paragraph that I'm going to read.
I think you're probably right. And I'm going to have you read that now, because we can't keep calling it Greenwood the Great if it's turned all dark and
No,
ugly.
it's turning
can
all
we?
dark, and it's full of spiders.
Ooh.
Then the name of the forest was changed, and Mirkwood it was called, for the nightshade lay deep there, and few dared to pass through, save only in the north where Thranduil's people still held the evil at bay. Whence it came, few could tell, and it was long ere even the wise could discover it. It was the shadow of Sauron, and the sign of his return. For coming out of the wastes of the east, he took up his abode in the south of the forest, and slowly he grew and took shape there again. In a dark hill he made his dwelling, and wrought there his sorcery, and all folk feared the sorcerer of Dol Guldur. And yet they knew not at first how great was their peril.
No, they didn't, did they?
No, they did not at all.
But there's another guy whose name is not mentioned in The Hobbit.
Yeah, the old necromancer.
Yep. We know he's a necromancer. We don't know he's Sauron, but he's Sauron.
He is Sauron.
So the text here goes on to talk about that even as these shadows were coming, the Istari showed up. But we know that we don't want to just settle for a single paragraph when several more will do. So
We can read an entire essay on them.
that's right. So I'm bringing up Unfinished Tales, Section 4, Chapter 2, or Part 4, Chapter 2, the Istari. And we're going to take turns on a couple of passages here. We're going to find out first. By the way, Sean, do you have a page number for us? It's I'm going to start on the second
section
paragraph.
begins, page 388.
Okay. They first appeared in Middle-earth about the year 1000 of the Third Age, but for long they went about in simple guise, as it were of men already old in years, but hale in body, travelers and wanderers, gaining knowledge of Middle-earth and all that dwelt therein, but revealing to none their powers and purposes. In that time men saw them seldom, and heeded them little. Then we find out that men actually feared them, even when they loved them, because they thought they were part of the elves, but they weren't. And here's where we really get their nature and their purpose. They were not so, for they came from over the sea out of the uttermost west, though this was for long known only to Círdan, guardian of the third ring, master of the Grey Havens, who saw their landings upon the western shores. Emissaries they were from the lords of the west, the Valar, who still took counsel for the governance of Middle-earth, and when the shadow of Sauron began first to stir again, took this means of resisting him. For with the consent of Eru, they sent members of their own high order, but clad in bodies as of men, real and not feigned, but subject to the fears and pains and weariness of earth, able to hunger and thirst and be slain, though because of their noble spirits they did not die, and aged only by the cares and labors of many long years. And this the Valar did, desiring to amend the errors of old, especially that they had attempted to guard and seclude the Eldar by their own might and glory fully revealed, whereas now their emissaries were forbidden to reveal themselves in forms of majesty, or to seek to rule the wills of men or elves by open display of power, but coming in shapes weak and humble, were bidden to advise and persuade men and elves to good, and to seek to unite in love and understanding all those whom Sauron, should he come again, would endeavor to dominate and corrupt. So let's talk about that.
That's a perfect passage to introduce the Istari, the wizards,
Isn't
because I think
nature and purpose right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think I want to just kind of back up. We won't read that first paragraph, but that first paragraph talks about why they're called the wizards, and I think that's worth talking about just for a moment, because it's really important to help us understand how we're supposed to view these wizards, these Istari. So wizard is a translation into English of their Quenya name Istar, or Sindarin Ithron, which basically means wise one, or one who knows things.
Okay.
And so Tolkien translated this as wizard because wizard is related to the word wise.
Right.
He even said himself that the translation is not perhaps happy because they are quite distinct from the wizards and magicians of later legend.
Yeah.
In letter 131, one of our favorites, he actually said that his use of the word wizard was utterly distinct from sorcerer or magician.
Yeah.
He said, it appears finally that they were, as one might say, the near equivalent in the mode of these tales, of angels, of guardian angels.
That's much better because an angel is a messenger. That's the word. Exactly. Angelos is
Angelos
messenger.
in Greek. Yeah, exactly. It's the origin of our word angel, but it really just meant messenger, emissary. And it's interesting that Tolkien himself uses the Greek word angelos to refer to him a couple of times in some of the other letters.
That's right, he does. I'd forgotten about that, but he does use that Greek word. And that's such an accurate term.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's really important for us to understand why they are different from the wizards that we might be used to from,
Harry Potter.
any other fantasy book or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. It's they don't cast magic spells. They're not they're not magicians.
Gandalf doesn't spend his time before sleeping at night preparing his spells for the next day.
No, he's not memorizing his spells. And
man, I didn't prepare Fireball. What in the world? Right. What am I thinking?
Right, exactly. Right. Yeah, and and there's they don't need mana potions or anything like that. I mean, there's none of that stuff. They are wise men. They're not sorcerers. They're wise men.
He reaches into his gray cloak, grabs a little blue bottle.
Yeah, right. Glug glug glug.
Okay, I'm ready to battle that Balrog now.
Right. Yeah. No, and I just think that's important because I mean, it's just really key to understanding how Tolkien used this word,
and to understanding their nature, their nature, and their purpose. Man, their purpose is awesome. I love this.
And that's tied in directly to their purpose because their purpose was not to openly display their power, but to convince others to join this battle.
Persuade them to good and seek to unite in love and understanding.
There you go. They're teachers. Guardian angels and teachers. Yeah,
they really are. And well, this is where the word wizard makes sense. They're genuinely wise. These are people who come in, these humble shapes. They're not seeking, their own authority. They're not seeking their own power. I mean, eventually one of them does. But, that's not their initial point. And so there's this natural wisdom about them because of who they are in the first place.
Because of who they came, and
exactly, the purpose that they were sent. Yeah. So really important, I think. I mean, that's such even if we didn't read anything else from the Istari, and we will, that was important because we really needed to understand exactly what's going on, who they are. And, I think a lot of that is lost for folks who maybe have never read the Silmarillion and certainly have never read Unfinished Tales if their only understanding of Gandalf is from The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, especially if their primary source of that information is the films. That's not really, put forward in any clear way in the films. But I understand. No. Again, that's not a criticism. How do you tell that story? So,
well, to their credit, I don't think there were a ton of open displays of power.
No,
but there were a couple. But I think
some of them were after when it was some of them were after when it was Gandalf the White, and he was allowed to show more power.
Yeah,
but the ones prior to that, when it was just Gandalf the Gray, or when you had the fight.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you didn't have him like calling down lightning or
no.
like delayed blast fireball or anything like that. It's just...
chain lightning. That would have been perfect when they're in the in Khazad-dûm and
Yeah, that would have been great.
Oh, man.
But
All right. So I'm going to have you read a little bit about the others.
yeah, yeah. So, did we talk about the first one to come?
Well, no, we're skipping. I mean, mostly
Yeah.
I'm having you
Get
talk
to the
about,
last one to come.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it was just okay. So the
So-
first one
so
has
the-
dark hair and a fair voice. Duh, it's Saruman. Okay.
And he's dressed in white. So
Mhm.
two guesses as to who that is. So then I'm going to
And
pick
you
up
only
the
get
next
one.
sentence. Right. I'll pick up at the next sentence. Others there were also, two clad in sea blue, and one in earthen brown. And last came one who seemed the least, less tall than the others, and in looks more aged, gray-haired and gray-clad, and leaning on a staff. But Círdan, from their first meeting at the Grey Havens, divined in him the greatest spirit and the wisest. And he welcomed him with reverence, and he gave to his keeping the third ring, Narya the Red. For, said he, great labors and perils lie before you, and lest your task prove too great and wearisome, take this ring for your aid and comfort. It was entrusted to me only to keep secret, and here upon the west shores it is idle. But I deem that in days ere long to come it should be in nobler hands than mine, that may wield it for the kindling of all hearts to courage.
Hmm.
And the grey messenger took the ring, and kept it ever secret. Yet the white messenger, who was skilled to uncover all secrets, after a time became aware of this gift, and begrudged it. And it was the beginning of the hidden ill will that he bore to the grey, which afterwards became manifest.
Oh, did it? Drama.
Yeah,
Yeah.
little family drama here within the
Yeah.
Istari.
Just a little. I mean, I really would have even had you pick up in the middle of that sentence where it was just, and last came one. Because really that's
Yeah,
what I wanted to focus on here. We'll touch on the others in a little bit. Interesting, as tall as Gandalf is, he's not supposed to be as tall as the others.
Right.
Radagast, I don't know why in the world he's like 5 foot tall in the movie. That's just silly. I mean, here we go. This guy's less tall than the
Most
others.
things about Radagast in that movie are silly.
Oh,
but
goodness,
we'll-
yes, that is so
We'll have
true.
we'll have an episode to talk about that in a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, we'll be talking about the Hobbit movies in just a couple episodes. So
Yep.
it just means we have to watch them again.
Yep.
Yeah, enough said about that. But so he gets the third ring,
He
Narya
gets
the
the third
Red.
ring, Narya the Red, the Ring of Fire.
The Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire. I fell into a burning ring of fire. And our audience is now going, okay, please stop. You can stop
Please
singing. I
stop.
get the joke now.
We get it.
Well, yeah, seriously.
You guys
Ring
have
of
some
Fire.
Johnny Cash on your iPods.
Seriously.
iPod.
I love that he gives it to him, and his statement to him is just
Yeah.
full of awesome.
He knows. I mean, Círdan's so wise. Remember how old
Yes.
he is.
Yeah, he has a
Um,
beard, which means he's really old, right?
He's really old. I mean, he recognizes that, his part now is to stay. It's to stay at the Grey Havens.
Yeah.
And the ring is not doing any good sitting
No.
there at the Grey Havens. It needs to go with someone who is going to use it.
Who's going to wield it? Yeah. I
Wield
love
it,
that
yes,
that
wield
phrase that
it.
he may
That's-
wield it
yes,
for the
you're
kindling
right.
of hearts.
Yes, very important use of phrase.
It really
Wield.
is. Tolkien and his words, he knew what he was doing. Hold and use. Not just hold, but hold
Yep.
and use.
Yeah. And we see that this is why Saruman ends
Yeah.
up, a rival of Gandalf.
Yeah.
He begrudges him the fact that he got this ring and that Gandalf got this ring and Saruman didn't.
Yeah, well, sorry, man, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and skip to the next, I don't know whether it's the next page on the hard copy. I'm sorry, I'm on my ebook copy, so forgive me. Indeed, of all the Istari, only one remained faithful, and he was the last comer. And I'm going to skip the bit about Radagast and Curanir, because we really want to talk about Gandalf here. Mm-hmm. But the last comer was named among the elves Mithrandir, the Grey Pilgrim, for he dwelt in no place, and gathered to himself neither wealth nor followers, but ever went to and fro in the Westlands from Gondor to Angmar, and from Lindon to Lorien, befriending all folk in times of need. Warm and eager was his spirit, and it was enhanced by the ring Narya, for he was the enemy of Sauron, opposing the fire that devours and wastes with the fire that kindles and succors in wan hope and distress. But his joy and his swift wrath were veiled in garments gray as ash, so that only those that knew him well glimpsed the flame that was within. Merry he could be, and kindly to the young and simple, and yet quick at times to sharp speech and the rebuking of folly. Boy, was he. I'm sorry.
I think Pippin knew that.
Pippin was the victim of that a few times. Oh, man. So sorry. Yeah, I can't. Throw yourself in next time, master.
Rid us of your stupidity.
But he was not proud. Boy, and that, again, I know I'm interrupting myself, but boy, that right there speaks volumes from Tolkien. But he was not proud and sought neither power nor praise. And thus far and wide he was beloved among all those that were not themselves proud. Mostly he journeyed unwearyingly on foot, leaning on a staff, and so he was called among men of the north Gandalf, the elf of the wand. Love that. Absolutely love that. I mean, yeah, is that the best description
I kind of stole
of him
your
right
thunder
there?
on that reveal a little bit.
No, not at all.
I don't think anybody listening doesn't know that already. But
no, exactly. I expect
it's such a cool reveal, though.
It is.
It was called Gandalf.
He was called Gandalf. But I mean, everybody knows who Mithrandir is.
Yeah.
So, I love the description of his nature and the fact that he was warm and eager, and that spirit was enhanced by the ring. Just a really cool. I mean, this is a great character study on Gandalf in just a single paragraph that really tells us so much.
We learn more about Gandalf from this. I mean, I guess, do we learn it? I don't know. I think it kind of confirms a lot of what
That's
we see
really what it
of
is.
his character in Lord of the Rings.
It draws out the detail.
Yeah.
It reminds us of certain things that we've seen and noticed.
Exactly.
And it places them in a set of defining characteristics. It's a really good summary. But probably only a better summary for those of us who already know Gandalf,
Yeah.
But good stuff. Really good stuff. So now we have the wizards are here. So now we're gonna go back to the text of the Silmarillion. That's the end of our unfinished tales usage for the night. We get by the way, just another mention of the word subtle. We're not going to read the whole section, but Curanir went most among men and was subtle in speech and skilled in the devices of smithcraft. Once again, subtle is not necessarily good. Let's just remember that.
He was one of the most frequently, in Lord of the Rings. That term I think was applied to him more than anybody else.
Oh yeah. In Lord of the Rings, you're right. Doing a word search for subtle, it's almost always Saruman.
Yep.
So all the wizards get together, and what happens? Sean, I've got a passage that I think we've marked for you.
Yep. But at length the shadow returned, and its power increased. And in that time was first made the Council of the Wise, that is called the White Council. And therein were Elrond, and Galadriel, and Círdan, and other lords of the Eldar, and with them were Mithrandir, and Curanir. And Curanir, that was Saruman the White, was chosen to be their chief, for he had most studied the devices of Sauron of old. Galadriel, indeed, had wished that Mithrandir should be the head of the council, and Saruman begrudged them that, for his pride and desire of mastery was grown great. But Mithrandir refused the office, since he would have no ties and no allegiance, save to those who sent him, and he would abide in no place, nor be subject to any summons. But Saruman now began to study the lore of the Rings of Power, their making and their history.
Interesting.
So another begrudging of Saruman being begrudging of some honor bestowed upon Gandalf, or attempted to be bestowed on Gandalf.
And another mention of his pride too.
And how much he'd studied the devices of Sauron of old. We get that he had studied Sauron before, and then he began to study the lore of the Rings of Power.
Yep.
And boy, we see where that ends up.
We do, and we see specifically that is one of the reasons for the problem that we'll see shortly. But let's go ahead and move on, because at the council, what do they discuss? So the shadow grows greater. So now we get the second council, right? This is Mithrandir goes to Dol Guldur, comes back, and he says to Elrond, "True, alas, is our guess. This is not one of the Ulyri, as many have long supposed. It is Sauron himself, who has taken shape again, and now grows apace. And he is gathering again all the rings to his hand, and he seeks ever for news of the One, and of the heirs of Isildur, if they live still on earth." And Elrond answered, "In the hour that Isildur took the ring and would not surrender it, this doom was wrought, that Sauron should return. Yet the One was lost," said Mithrandir, "and while it still lies hid, we can master the enemy, if we gather our strength, and tarry not too long. Then the White Council was summoned, and Mithrandir urged them to swift deeds. But Curanir spoke against him, and counseled them to wait yet and to watch. "For I believe not," said he, "that the one will ever be found again in Middle-earth. Into Anduin it fell, and long ago I deem it was rolled to the sea. There it shall lie to the end, when all this world is broken, and the deeps are removed." Therefore naught was done at that time, though Elrond's heart misgave him. And he said to Mithrandir, "None the less I forebode that the one will yet be found, and then war will arise again, and in that war this age will be ended. Indeed, in a second darkness it will end, unless some strange chance deliver us, that my eyes cannot see." "Many are the strange chances of the world," said Mithrandir, "and help oft shall come from the hands of the weak when the wise falter." I love that last line.
Oh, it's
That's
so
such
great.
a famous line, but it's such a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah.
And also, did you notice,
And
indeed, in a second darkness it will end? I got to say, on the film, on the front of the films, that was a good use of that line in the films to get that.
I'm trying to remember when
Gandalf says it, I think, and he's talking about, and it will cover all the lands in a second darkness.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I remember that. Yeah.
And I thought, I know that phrase. Gandalf doesn't say it. Who says it? And sure enough, it's Elrond. But
it's Elrond.
It's they do a good job of taking lines that they really want to get in there, and finding ways to get them to other characters. We'll talk more about that in a couple weeks. A couple episodes. A lot more.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. I would say.
Yeah.
But you're right. This is one of the good ones.
Giving Tom to Fangorn, that makes sense. Giving
Gandalf,
giving Gandalf to Wormtongue, not so much.
Right. Yeah.
But I get it. So by this point, though,
I like the "unless some strange chance delivers that my eyes cannot see." I mean,
oh yeah,
we might need some sort of a eucatastrophe.
We might. Can we dial up? Do we have 1-800 eucatastrophe on our speed dial?
Right.
So we already find out, by the way, that Saruman has already become a traitor. And we find out that the reason for that is that he had too long studied the ways of Sauron, and now he envied him as a rival rather than hated his works.
Oh, man.
Oh, that's just awful.
We didn't really talk about this, but, we do find out in that Istari essay that Curimo, was actually one of the Maiar of Aule in his origin.
That's right.
Just like Sauron.
Just like Sauron.
So you can probably
Poor
see
Aule
where
is
some
not
of that...
having a great track record.
No, he really doesn't have a good track record with people who follow him. We've got Saruman, Sauron, Feanor.
Oh man!
But I not to mention Aule's own transgression, which apologizing goes a long way.
It does. But, genuine repentance and humility does help.
Yeah. But I think we do see that that Tolkien is telling us that this this idea that the technology and craft and artifice can be a path to corruption. It's not always,
and an easy path to corruption. I mean, in other words, almost like more likely than not, and you're going to have to work a lot harder to not succumb than if you're doing something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt. So then we get, I'm going to have you read the next passage. It's a fairly lengthy one, but it tells us a little bit about the next council meeting.
Okay. But ever the shadow in Mirkwood grew deeper, and to Dol Guldur evil things repaired out of all the dark places of the world, and they were united again under one will, and their malice was directed against the elves and the survivors of Númenor. Therefore at last the council was again summoned, and the lore of the rings was much debated. But Mithrandir spoke to the council, saying, "It is not needed that the ring should be found, for while it abides on earth and is not unmade, still the power that it holds will live, and Sauron will grow and have hope. The might of the elves and the elf friends is less now than of old. Soon he will be too strong for you, even without the great ring, for he rules the 9, and of the 7 he has recovered 3. We must strike." To this Curanir now assented, desiring that Sauron should be thrust from Dol Guldur, which was nigh to the river, and should have leisure to search there no longer. Therefore, for the last time he aided the council, and they put forth their strength, and they assailed Dol Guldur, and drove Sauron from his hold, and Mirkwood for a brief while was made wholesome again. But their stroke was too late, for the Dark Lord had foreseen it, and he had long prepared all his movements, and the Ulaidi, his 9 servants, had gone before him to make ready for his coming. Therefore his flight was but a feint, and he soon returned, And ere the wise could prevent him, he re-entered his kingdom in Mordor and reared once again the dark towers of Barad-dûr.
Man.
So this is all stuff that happens during The Hobbit, isn't it?
Well, yeah, during that timeline, and the films, of course, touch on it. But we should probably clarify that this attack on Dol Guldur did not include a nuclear Galadriel. Yes, she was the mightiest. Well, no, she was the mightiest of the elves still remaining. We know that. But going back to that section on the Istari in Unfinished Tales, Tolkien says that Galadriel may have been, quote, the greatest of the Eldar surviving in Middle-earth, but that she was, quote, unconquerable in resistance, but incapable of punitive action.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So, no, she was not an offensive weapon, and certainly she was not some secret, super powerful, take the lid off of her and, to open up a can of whoop something. She's not, that's not how it works.
No. There was so much wrong with that in that movie.
So much wrong with that scene.
Yeah.
But hey,
But kudos to them for trying to,
I did like that they wanted to bring something in from that time.
That they wanted to show that Gandalf and the White Council were actually doing something.
And that Saruman was already possibly a traitor.
Was already a traitor. Yeah. I just wish they hadn't done that.
The nuclear Galadriel was a little over the top.
Yeah.
Well, not to mention the incredible fight with the Uladri, who were not there. They had gone before him to make ready his
They were already in Mordor.
They were putting the pictures on the walls, getting the furniture in the right place, getting cable installed,
stocking the fridge.
Gotta get that Mordor ale in there.
Yeah.
And even though we're not going to read it, there's a line here that Curanir withdrew to Isengard and took counsel with none save himself. Can we just point out how many times we pointed this out, that nothing good ever happens to people in Tolkien stories who isolate themselves and stop taking advice?
It ain't wrong.
No. Is that dust from the Feanor Pinata again? I mean,
this I keep saying this, but this might be our last chance to whack the Feanor Pinata.
I don't think it will. I'm bound and determined to find ways to do that well into The Hobbit.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but I'll find a way. Oh, goodness. But for now...
You know who Thorin reminds me of here? Feanor.
Feanor. He just reminds me of Feanor.
And that will actually be true at
a couple of points. Yes, it will. I kid, of course. I don't know that I'll really be able to bring in Feanor very often in The Hobbit, but hey, it's one of my sports. It's one of my hobbies. I mean, what can I do? Yeah. I go Feanor hunting. So
you know who blew the best smoke rings? Feanor.
Feanor.
He may have been bad in a lot of ways, but that guy could blow
a smoke ring. All right. We have digressed. I'm going to take most of the next paragraph.
Please.
Then in the midst of gathering fear and the rumor of war, the foreboding of Elrond was proved true, and the One Ring was indeed found again by a chance more strange than even Mithrandir had foreseen, and it was hidden from Curanir and from Sauron. For it had been taken from Anduin long ere they sought for it, being found by one of the small fisher folk that dwelt by the river ere the kings failed in Gondor. And by its finder it was brought beyond search into dark hiding under the roots of the mountains. There it dwelt, until even in the year of the assault upon Dol Guldur it was found again, by a wayfarer, fleeing into the depths of the earth in the pursuit of the Orcs, and passed into a far distant country, even to the land of the Perianath, the little people, the halflings, who dwelt in the west of Eriador. And ere that day they had been held of small account by elves and by men, and neither Sauron nor any of the wise save Mithrandir had in all their counsels given thought to them.
Boom.
The halflings!
Yay, we've got hobbits finally.
And the poor unnamed wayfarer, who I think we all know is Bilbo.
Yep.
I love that. He's not even named. But then again, we summarized the entire Hobbit and Lord of the Rings in 2 paragraphs in this chapter.
Yeah.
So
exactly. I mean, like that. This is not only that's the Hobbit in one.
That's
sentence.
The Hobbit right there. Yeah, that is the Hobbit.
I mean, it doesn't really go into all the the main story of the dragon and everything. But you got what the Hobbit in one sentence. You got the sentence before that is Gollum.
Yeah.
So yeah. And
then you've got there it dwelt. Is the sentence about the Hobbit, and that's it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And now you're going to read.
Too funny. It is a funny perspective, kind of a perspective check for you.
It really is, and it makes you wonder just how big the stories in the Silmarillion really were, if they had been expanded the way the Hobbit was expanded, because this is summarized.
Man, you're not kidding about that. Yeah.
I mean, goodness.
Yeah, we've got 8 pages or 9 pages or whatever we have of Eärendil.
Right.
Imagine if we had
a full treatment like the Hobbit.
A full treatment like the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, man.
Oh, goodness. We have a flavor of that with of Tuor and his coming to Gondolin. We see just how he was able to take something that was 2 pages and turn it into, 30.
30.
That you just still want more so much that,
Yeah.
But you are about to read the entirety of the Lord of the Rings in about 90 seconds.
I know, it's great. I love this. All right. Here let it be said that in those days the heir of Isildur arose in the north, and he took the shards of the sword of Elendil, and in Imladris they were reforged. And he went then to war, a great captain of men. He was Aragorn, son of Arathorn, the 39th heir in the right line from Isildur, and yet more like to Elendil than any before him. Battle there was in Rohan, and Curanir the traitor was thrown down, and Isengard broken. And before the city of Gondor a great field was fought, and the Lord of Morgul, captain of Sauron, there passed into darkness. And the heir of Isildur led the host of the west to the black gates of Mordor. In that last battle were Mithrandir, and the sons of Elrond, and the king of Rohan, and lords of Gondor, and the heir of Isildur with the Dunedain of the north. There at the last they looked upon death and defeat, and all their valor was in vain, for Sauron was too strong. Yet in that hour was put to the proof that which Mithrandir had spoken, and help came from the hands of the weak when the wise faltered. For, as many songs have since sung, it was the Perianeth, the little people, dwellers in hillsides and meadows, that brought them deliverance. For Frodo the halfling, it is said, at the bidding of Mithrandir, took on himself the burden, and alone, with his servant, he passed through peril and darkness, and came at last in Sauron's despite even to Mount Doom, and there, into the fire where it was wrought, he cast the great ring of power, and so at last it was unmade, and its evil consumed.
Wow. Well, I guess there's no need to read Lord of the Rings now.
No. This has been the Prancing Pony Podcast, folks.
Thanks for joining us, folks. Bye.
And poor Sam's not...
I know. Sam doesn't even get a mention.
Of course,
not
neither is
even
Bilbo.
a mention. So. He's the hero, but, alone with his servant. And that's appropriate. That's the humility of that we get with Sam, I think.
Yeah.
My goodness, what an amazing little summary that is.
I know. It's great.
It's
almost funny.
It is. It really is. I mean, when you're super familiar with the story and you're like, well, there's 2 chapters. There's a chapter.
Yeah.
There's a chapter and a half in like 3 words. Boom, we're done.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And I want to know if there's anybody out there that's ever read the Silmarillion first and reads this and thinks, wow, this sounds like a really good story. I wish that was a novel.
I don't know. I know that
probably not. But...
in all the groups and all the nobody, when people say which book should I read first, it's never the Silmarillion if you've never read one. Right. I mean, if you get this all the time. People, I've seen the movie. Should I start with the Silmarillion then? No, you should still start with the Hobbit, dude. Trust me.
Yeah.
But for those of us who are familiar with the Legendarium, this is the reason why we started with the Silmarillion. Because there's so much in the way of thematic material that the other stories build on, that starting here was important.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Do as we say, not as we do. I guess it's kind of what we're coming to.
It's a very, very good point at our own slight hypocrisy there.
Just a little bit. But yeah, if you've never read a word of Tolkien, then first of all, you're not listening to me right now. Almost certainly. But if you are, for some reason, and you've just found this randomly, please don't start with the Silmarillion. Start with the Hobbit, and then come back to us when you're ready to tackle the Silmarillion. Oh, goodness. Okay, so the tree comes back again. the white tree flowers again because another seedling was found by Mithrandir. And I love that. The elder days were not wholly forgotten in the hearts of the kings. Nope. Just beautiful stuff. But...
well, and they shouldn't be because, the queen was almost from the elder days.
Yeah, so. Almost. And so now I'm with heavy heart, really, because here we are 48 episodes into our show. I'm about to read the last text in the Silmarillion. So here we go.
Let's do it.
Now all these things were achieved for the most part by the counsel and vigilance of Mithrandir, and in the last few days he was revealed as a lord of great reverence, and clad in white he rode into battle. But not until the time came for him to depart was it known that he had long guarded the red ring of fire. At the first, that ring had been entrusted to Círdan, lord of the havens, but he had surrendered it to Mithrandir, for he knew whence he came, and whither at last he would return. "Take now this ring," he said, "for thy labours and thy cares will be heavy, but in all it will support thee and defend thee from weariness. For this is the ring of fire, and herewith, maybe, thou shalt rekindle hearts to the valour of old in a world that grows chill. But as for me, my heart is with the sea, and I will dwell by the grey shores, guarding the havens until the last ship sails. Then I shall await thee." White was that ship, and long was it a building, and long it awaited the end of which Círdan had spoken. But when all these things were done, and the heir of Isildur had taken up the lordship of men, and the dominion of the west had passed to him, then it was made plain that the power of the three rings also was ended, and to the firstborn the world grew old and grey. In that time the last of the Noldor set sail from the havens, and left Middle-earth forever. And latest of all, the keepers of the three rings rode to the sea, and Master Elrond took there the ship that Círdan had made ready. In the twilight of autumn it sailed out of Mithlond, until the seas of the bent world fell away beneath it, and the winds of the round sky troubled it no more. And borne upon the high airs above the mists of the world, it passed into the ancient west, and an end was come for the Eldar of story and of song.
Wow, that really does.
It does. It
give us the end of the I mean, that's the true end of the story of Lord of the Rings, right there.
It is. It is, and it gets you right in the feels. I mean,
it does. Yeah.
Especially
after reading the Silmarillion, and you've spent all this time with the elves. You've gone from the creation of the universe through the creation of the elves, and you've been reading about the elves for close to 300 pages.
Yeah.
And
intense
now,
pages too.
And now they're gone.
I mean,
yeah.
As 40 some odd episodes have shown.
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
my.
And now they're gone.
They are.
I mean, and we're going to get to spend some more time with them in the Third Age, because we're going to go back and read, the texts that that Tolkien is known for. But this is it. You read this and you realize this is it. It's one of those like the end of the story of Aragorn and Arwen.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking in its finality.
A poignancy to it, and such a sorrowful finality. Yeah, I think is really what it boils down to.
Yeah.
My goodness, I don't even know what else to say. I mean, it is such a powerful moment to realize that this is the end for the elves.
Yeah.
And like you said, we'll get more. It's not like we're not going to see any elves when we read The Hobbit. Tra-la-la-lally.
Well, and
we're going to get plenty of them in Lord of the Rings, but
Well, and we know from Tolkien's other writings that there's certainly the possibility that some elves, Avari and things like that, stuck around, faded, gave rise to all kinds of later stories of men. But this is it for the Eldar.
Right.
Yes, the Eldar of story and of song. This is the passing of an age. This is the passing of this age of myth.
It really is. And
the true rise of the dominion of men with the Fourth Age.
Absolutely. Well, and it's also the passing of this episode of the Prancing Pony podcast.
Very well done.
We want to thank you all very much for joining us as always, but we're not quite done with the Silmarillion yet, are we, Sean?
No, of course not, Alan. We've got one more episode coming. No, we've got one more episode coming on it.
That's right. We're going to spend 90 minutes on the Note on Pronunciation.
Yay!
Okay, we'll spare you that.
Thankfully, I think I would be the only person looking forward to that, and I'm sure I probably could spend 90 or more.
You probably could.
But no, actually, in our next episode, coming out 2 weeks from today, we're going to spend some time revisiting the story by going back and taking another look at some of our favorite moments.
Fun.
Kind of remembering some of the our favorite things about the first age. And we'll also, hopefully, get through most of the questions about the first age that are still sitting at the bottom of Barlaman's bag. And I probably shouldn't even promise most. I'll just say we'll get through some.
We'll do our best.
We'll get through as many as we can.
But wouldn't that be nice if we could get through most?
Yeah.
Don't worry, folks. If you're still catching up and haven't gotten your first age questions into us, go ahead and still do so. We will continue to take them as we move into, can it be The Hobbit?
I know, yes. It's unbelievable that we're going into The Hobbit, but not yet.
No, like we said, that would be too simple. After that recap episode in a couple of weeks, we're going to spend 2 more episodes talking about the films. We know many of you have been waiting for us to spend some time to talk about those things and about what we liked and didn't like, and now is your chance to hear it.
Yeah, and don't worry, we are going to go easy on them. In fact, we've said this before. Alan and I are both fans of the Lord of the Rings movies, at least. So we're going to be doing those first.
Absolutely. And our apologies to the true purists out there, and we know you are.
That will be going a little easy on them, yeah.
We will be covering the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy 2 episodes from now. And then the episode after that, we're going to go to the Hobbit movie trilogy.
It'll be okay. Just take a deep breath and think of Tauriel.
That's exactly what I don't want to do. It's a lot. But then we'll have one more special episode before we dive into The Hobbit, our interview with the Tolkien professor himself, Dr. Corey Olsen. So if you've not yet read his excellent book, Exploring J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, please be sure to pick it up and read it in the next 6 weeks or so.
Yeah, and we'll have a link to that in our show notes and on our official library tab. And remember, if you're reading along and like to take notes as much as we do, don't mark up your first edition hardcovers. Go to that official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, and you'll find links to cheap paperbacks of all of Tolkien's works, as well as audiobooks, music CDs, and some other cool things for your Tolkien collection.
And please, leave us a review on iTunes. Seriously, guys, there are 3,000 of you listening, but we only have a few dozen reviews. Now, don't get me wrong, we're eternally grateful for the ones we have. But please throw us a bone on that. Even if you don't listen to us on iTunes, you can leave us a review. It's just a couple of minutes and an Apple ID.
Yep. And if you haven't done so already, you can subscribe on iTunes or through your favorite podcast app to make sure you get all of our future episodes. You can find our RSS feed on our website or find us on Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, or most other podcast directories.
And a big thank you to those of you who are connecting with us on social media. We set out to start that conversation that everyone can join, and that's why we called this The Prancing Pony. And it's why we have the online common room on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod. And don't forget to check out the exciting rewards waiting for you at patreon.com/prancingponypod.
And social media is a great place to share our podcast as well. So please retweet us, share us, tell your friends.
Please do.
Really, please retweet us and share our posts. We really thank you.
We really do. And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or your Gandalf cosplay cover of Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire to the Prancing Pony Podcast at gmail.com, and we'll try to get it into our next episode. Well, 2 hours and 15 minutes is still far too short a time to spend among such admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.